resurfaces, the engine started cold, with templates for the stories we once told. No admirals to guide us, just the missions we would write, building star bases through the Delta Quadrant night.
Foundry's light was faded, and the servers all went dark, but every player author left a steady, glowing spark.
We'd sail beyond the sunset on the Botany Bay, moving all the stories that the code gave away. The archives were locked, and the access was denied, but the spark of the creator wouldn't stay inside. On April 11th, when the signal went away, the legacy ended so the work could begin.
The Foundry's light was faded, and the servers all went dark, but every player author left a steady, glowing spark. He sailed beyond the sunset on the Botany Bay, moving all the stories
Not the code gave The slots are locked, the spotlight's gone to black, but under the uniform won't be held back. The mission is resolved, the pages take flight. Admiral Aaron out into the
A note on the audio. Just a quick heads up before we get started. This text is being read by an automated audio program. You might run into a few digital hiccups along the way. Every so often the system might mispronounce a word, skip a line, miss a word, or repeat a phrase later on. I appreciate you sticking with it despite these little technical quirks. About the author, Admiral Aaron is more than just a name on a screen. He is a persona built over years of role-play and community storytelling within the Star Trek Online universe. Long before Under the Uniform, Aaron lived through player-driven logs and narrative posts that pushed beyond the limits of mere gameplay. This dedication earned him a place as a spotlighted Foundry author, where his missions became staple adventures for the community. While he is not part of official Trek canon, Admiral Aaron represents over a decade of collaborative storytelling and a deep-seated love for the craft of mission building. Dedication. This story belongs to the Star Trek Online community. I especially want to thank the Foundry creators who refused to stop telling stories just because the missions ended. Your imagination shaped my voice and reminded me why these stories matter in the first place. To the LGBTQ+ community, thank you for looking for yourselves among the stars. You found belonging and hope in a future where identity is celebrated rather than erased. Your joy and your resilience are the reasons Star Trek continues to endure. To my life partner, I could not have created this without you. For my friend Colin, you are not forgotten. Your enthusiasm and friendship are woven into this journey, and I remember you with love. To my father, who filled my childhood with wonder and curiosity through a shared love of this universe, your memory travels with me. Finally, to my friends and editors who questioned, encouraged, and helped me find the honesty in these pages, this story exists because of all of you. IDIC. Content warning. This story deals closely with the trauma of assimilation. Readers will find honest portrayals of post-traumatic stress, intrusive memories, and the slow, difficult road to recovery. These pages include references to violence and the heavy emotional weight left behind by war, captivity, and loss. While the narrative explores adult romantic relationships and physical intimacy between consenting characters, there are no explicit sexual scenes. You will also find mentions of body scarring and medical implants, but these are framed through the lens of healing and self-acceptance. Please take care of yourself while you read. Your well-being is more important than the story. Continuity. This story is built on the foundation of the original Admiral Aaron Star Trek online Foundry missions. However, players familiar with those missions might notice some differences. A few facts have been retconned in under the uniform to better fit the current 2411 timeline and the specific path of the Northstar. These changes were made to help the story flow more naturally and to give the characters more room to grow. While some dates or tactical details have shifted, the heart of those original stories remains the same. Historians note. This story finds its place in the later years of Star Trek Online. The galaxy has finally moved past the shadow of the Iconian War, and the chaos of the Hur'q conflict settled into a fragile peace between the crises of the Alliance. Our story begins with an engagement in the Kinja system. Soon after, the action shifts to Earth Space Dock. This story unfolds within the Kings and Queens arc, nestled between the Axiom mission and the Borg multiverse patrols, picking up just after the events of Unwanted Guests. This story lives in the gaps between the missions you know. Stardate chronology. Current date, August 9th, 2411. Stardate, 88,605.00.
Under the Uniform by STO Admiral Aaron. Prologue. The voices were never loud in Aaron's dreams. They never needed to be. The command to comply echoed through his mind with a clarity that made his skin crawl. You will comply. Proceed to Node 317. Primary systems require optimization. Individuality is irrelevant. Aaron stood within an endless lattice of green light. His hands moved without his permission, executing commands as if his body were merely a terminal. Drones reassigned, power grids balanced, decisions made without hesitation or doubt. The logic was perfect. That was the part that truly terrified him. Resistance is futile. The phrase stretched and distorted until it lost its meaning, becoming a tone that sat heavy in his stomach. Aaron woke with a sharp gasp. The nightmare dissolved into the low, steady hum of the environmental systems. For a split second the silence felt wrong. It was too quiet. The room felt disconnected from the constant, stifling warmth of the collective. His sheets, damp with sweat, clung to his skin while his heart hammered against his ribs. The bed felt too large and far too cold without another body to anchor him. He sat up slowly. His quarters resolved into familiar lines, the light still dimmed to the night cycle. He took a breath to steady himself, then another, forcing his pulse to sync with the ship's thrum rather than the phantom noise in his head. A soft chime came from the bedside table. Aaron reached for the pad. A new transmission sat at the top of the queue, and he started by scanning the supplemental notes from First Officer Zhong Sumin. Sumin had flagged a draft for the next Attention Crew update regarding a bizarre replicator malfunction on Deck 8. For some reason, the replicators were stuck in a strange feedback loop. Every unit on that deck would only produce lukewarm neon-pink synthale, no matter what was ordered. In the next paragraph, Su Min had even added a short note. He suggested implementing an Endeavour system for the crew. It would be a new initiative where Command could track individual accomplishments to help boost morale. They suggested a rotating set of goals for each day, such as defeating a certain number of simulated hostiles in the holodeck or assisting with hull repairs. It was exactly the kind of focus the crew would need. Aaron made a mental note to. Circle back to the idea later, but for now he had to keep moving through the queue. The humour faded as he scrolled further. A priority transmission from Captain Jan Darkrider brought the harsh realities of the front lines back into focus. There were confirmed Borg Kingdom movements near the neutral zone. Sector grid corrections suggested the Borg Kingdom was already adapting to their patrol patterns. Most sobering was the casualty list from the latest skirmish. Aaron sighed, his eyes lingering on the name U.S.S. Northstar at the top of the report. The jump from Pink Ale to Borg Kingdom incursions was a strange way to live. He set the pad down. Looking at it made his chest ache. 0200 hours. The night had barely begun, yet the conflict was already pressing forward. He swung his legs out of bed and felt the cold deck against his feet. As he stepped into the bathroom, the lights flared. For a heartbeat he flinched, expecting the sickly green of a regeneration alcove instead of standard Starfleet white. Aaron gripped the edge of the sink. The man in the mirror looked older than he remembered. He looked tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. His eyes had learned to hide fear behind rank and routine, but at 0200, the mask slipped. He splashed cold water onto his face. Computer, begin log. Admiral's log. Stardate 88,605.08. We are still holding the Kinja system, though barely. The Etherian distress signal is still echoing across subspace like a scream in the dark. It confirms what I feel in my bones. The Borg Kingdom is moving again. He paused to rub the back of his neck, trying to work out a knot in the muscle that wouldn't let go. The Northstar is taking a beating from the mirror universe Borg. Emergency force fields are the only thing keeping the vacuum of space at bay on decks 12 and 14. And then there is the stench of burnt EPs conduits everywhere. We have entire sections running on nothing but borrowed power and prayers. The crew is beyond exhausted. They are pulling double rotations, joking just to keep from breaking. I know the look well. I see it in the mirror every morning. I have notified Command that we cannot hold this system much longer. They assure us that reinforcements and supplies are on their way, but I have heard that promise before. This feels too much like the Dominion War, watching the fleet being stretched thin until it starts to snap. Command calls this an active incursion point and wants to reinforce the barrier to the mycelial network, but to me, it is just survival by repetition. The Shadows, the Iconians, the Herc, it was just one war after another, layer upon layer of conflict. I tell myself I am still fit for Command, but some nights, the past does not stay where it belongs. We hold the line. Whatever comes through those vortices has to come through us first. Computer, end log. He stayed there for a moment, hands white-knuckled against the edge of the sink. He didn't look up right away. When he finally did, the reflection felt like a stranger. The man staring back was grey and hollowed out, with eyes that hadn't seen a full night's rest since the Borg Kingdom appeared in the sector. He traced the heavy lines around his mouth and the set of his jaw, looking for any trace of the officer who had once felt invincible. There wasn't much left of him. He looked like a man held together by habit and coffee, a ghost just wearing the rank. He waited, almost expecting the reflection to say something or finally break, but it just stared back, as tired as he was. He pushed away from the sink and stepped back into the bedroom. The bed looked like a trap, almost too inviting for his own good. He sank onto the edge of the mattress and just stared at the ceiling, listening to the low, familiar hum of the ship vibrating through the deck plates. He tried to let the ship lull him, desperate to shut his brain off for even 10 minutes. He knew the bridge would call sooner than that, but he told himself to just breathe and stay still, even if sleep was unlikely. His eyes had only just closed when the sensation hit. It was a cold pressure at the base of his skull. It felt like a phantom hand tightening its grip. This wasn't a headache. It was a signal, and it was searching for a receiver. Then his comm badge chirped. "Bridge to Admiral Aaron." He was already moving. He tapped the badge. "Go ahead." "Sir, sensors are picking up a gravimetric distortion on the edge of the system." Lieutenant Commander Maressa Jatal's voice cut in. "Confirmed, Admiral. Vortex opening. It is a Borg Kingdom tactical cube." Aaron closed his eyes as the phantom connection flared. The pressure in his head throbbed in time with the incoming red alert. "I know," he said quietly. He stood up, the last traces of sleep vanishing. "On my way." The room bathed in the harsh crimson of emergency lighting as the rhythmic whoop of the alarm began. Aaron reached for his uniform. The motions were automatic, practiced from a lifetime of nights like this. One thought cut through the exhaustion as he stepped toward the door. The Borg Kingdom was not finished, and neither was he. Chapter 1. The turbolift doors parted and opened onto absolute chaos. The ship was screaming. Consoles did not just spark, they detonated, spraying shards across the bridge. Every time a Borg antiproton beam lashed the shields, the deck heaved violently. It was a sickening, uneven rattle, the kind of vibration that made it feel like the Northstar was trying to shake itself apart. This was the sound of a ship compensating for damage faster than its structural integrity field could handle. Red alert lights bled over the bulkheads, casting shadows across the faces of a crew locked in a losing fight. Fires had broken out near the science stations, fed by ruptured conduits. Thick, black smoke began to curl against the ceiling, making it hard to breathe as the suppression systems struggled to engage. "Report," Aaron barked. He moved toward the center, his boots slipping on the deck as it pitched. "Borg impact, port side," the tactical officer yelled over the roar of a ruptured vent. "Shields are failing across multiple vectors," Lieutenant Commander Maressa Jatal reported. The Caitian's ears flattened against her skull as her claws clattered rapidly across the tactical console. Sparks rained down around her, yet her voice remained precise. "The Kingdom Cube is already adapting. Frequency remodulation isn't doing a damn thing." Aaron braced himself as another hit rocked the ship. Static washed over the view screen, and as it settled, the nightmare emerged. It was the unmistakable silhouette of a Borg Kingdom tactical cube. It just hung there in the silence, a cold weight in the room that made it hard to breathe. The bridge shuddered again. "Left shields have failed, right shields have failed, forward shields are failing," the computer intoned. "Computer? Cease all notifications," Aaron snapped. The voice cut out, leaving a heavy ringing silence. The ship groaned, the metal vibrating right through the soles of his boots. The wail of damage alarms had faded into a dull, persistent drone, clinging to the air like a headache that wouldn't quit. Aaron turned toward tactical. "Options? Give me anything." "Nothing good, Admiral," Maressa said, her hands never stopping. "Phasers are cycling too slowly. Torpedo reserves are critical." Before he could answer, the last of the shields gave out. The deck tilted dangerously as the Kingdom Cube filled the screen, eerie red ripples dancing over its hull like a predator's pulse. An incoming channel forced itself open, overriding the lockout. "We are the Borg. Submit to our authority and prepare for assimilation. Resistance will be annihilated. Go to hell and take your kingdom with you," Aaron yelled. He reached out and slammed his hand against the console, cutting the link. They were losing once more, and a memory he had buried deep clawed its way back into his mind. It brought with it the phantom sting of injection tubes and the mechanical whisper of a million voices echoing in the back of his mind. He had been assimilated once during the Dominion War, and he could still feel the slow, terrifying erosion of his name as his identity was stripped away. He was not going back to that collective nightmare while he still drew breath. "Incoming!" Maressa shouted. Multiple transphasic torpedoes streaked through the black. Aaron lunged for his chair, his fingers digging into the armrest. His eyes locked on his first officer, Jean Sumin. Sumin stood at his station, his uniform still immaculate. It was a final quiet defiance against the ruin around them. That discipline was a part of him, born in the New Harmony colony where he grew up and carried through years at Aaron's side. He knew the Admiral's silences, his habits, and his fears. When their eyes met, there was no panic, just a single imperceptible nod. It was enough. "All hands, brace for impact," Aaron ordered. The first torpedo tore through the hull. The explosion threw Aaron forward, ripping him from his chair. Everything went white for a second as a spike of pain shot through his shoulder the moment he hit the deck. Somewhere deep in the structure of the ship, bulkheads groaned and shrieked. The last thing he heard before the world lurched was the sound of tearing metal and Su Min's cry. The second impact was worse. The third hit sent the ship into a roll as the bridge plunged into darkness. Emergency lights flickered to life, weak and sickly through a fog of pungent smoke. The deck was slick under Aaron's palms as he forced himself up. "Status?" he croaked. The only answer was the sharp crackle of a fire at one of the tactical stations. "Status," he repeated. "Critical failures on all decks," Maressa finally answered. Her voice was strained. "Engineering says the core is stable, but if we take another hit, containment will fail." The ship was dead in space, drifting just enough to remind him it was still in one piece, even if it could no longer fight. "I need options," Aaron said. No one spoke. That was when the silence from the first officer's station finally hit him. Aaron turned. Su Min lay on the deck, his body twisted at an angle that made Aaron's stomach turn. A dark, heavy pool of blood was spreading beneath his head. A jagged piece of the console was wedged deep into his skull, the metal glinting every time the emergency lights flickered. For a second, Aaron just stared. He could not make his brain accept it. He dropped to his knees, pressing his fingers to Su Min's neck. He waited, counting the seconds, begging for a beat that did not come. The bridge noise washed out, replaced by a sudden, jarring hit of memory. Su Min standing a half-step behind him in every briefing, the quiet nods, the unwavering steadiness. Aaron stood up slowly. His hands were wet with his friend's blood. Starfleet taught you how to command. It forced you to make the calls no one else wanted to, but it never taught you how to carry the weight of a friend's blood on your hands without breaking. The bridge felt empty and wrong. The systems were dead, but this was worse. The ship's soul was gone. "The Borg have stopped firing," Maressa said, her voice a whisper. "Sir, what are your orders?" "There's only one order, Lieutenant Commander. We hold," Aaron replied. Aaron knew that silence. They were coming for the survivors. He looked at his hands, then back to the screen. He opened his mouth to order the crew to the armory, but Maressa beat him to it. "Admiral, another ship just dropped out of warp. Identifying, it is the U.S.S. Holanov." Aaron looked at the screen, his vision blurred. "The Holanov," he repeated. Chapter 2. The static on the main view screen cleared. The image came alive. Captain Arya Rachel appeared with a smile that looked like she had just walked into a mess hall instead of a battlefield. That smile had always been her tell. It was calm confidence layered over sharp instincts. She refused to let rank strip humanity out of her leadership, and her crews followed her because of it. "Aaron," she said warmly, "you managed to do it again. Command may just have your ass for this one." Aaron released a soft breath, one that carried more feeling than he meant to show. It was a brief, unguarded moment before he pulled himself back behind his shields. He and Rachel went back years. She was the one who always reminded him to breathe. Where Aaron carried silence, she carried momentum. "Welcome to paradise, Captain," Aaron said, his voice completely deadpan as he looked at the wreckage. Her smile softened as her gaze shifted past him to scan the bridge. The change was subtle, but Aaron caught it. Her eyes lingered on the deck behind the captain's chair where the still form lay. "Jean Su Min," she said quietly. Aaron gave a single, sharp nod. The humor vanished from her face. She didn't offer platitudes or empty reassurance. She knew he would hate them. Instead, she simply acknowledged the loss, letting it exist between them. "We will take it from here," Rachel said, her voice firm now. "Focus on stabilizing the Northstar. We will handle the Borg." The difference between them felt sharper than ever in that moment. Rachel was moving forward, holding the line, while Aaron stood in the wreckage, trying to keep the past from swallowing him whole. Before he could respond, the Holanov shuddered under incoming fire. Rachel's attention snapped toward her own tactical display. "I will check back," she said. "You are not alone in this." The channel cut out. The bridge felt quieter without her. The weight of Su Min's absence seemed to settle into the lingering smoke. "All stations," Aaron said. "Get whatever systems you can operational. We assist where we can." The Holanov didn't just join the fight, it seized the battle. The Trafalgar-class juggernaut slid between the Northstar and the cube, putting its hull right in the line of fire. Anti-proton beams lashed out from the cube, but the energy splashed harmlessly against the Holonoff shields. "They're drawing their fire," Maressa said. The Borg attempted to adjust, their beams shifting from a steady pattern to rapid, desperate pulses, but the Holonoff didn't give them a chance to adjust. The ship turned, bringing its broadside phaser banks to bear on the cube. The beams carved deep into the cube's hull, sending debris spinning out into the dark. Aaron felt the deck of the Northstar settle as the Holonoff passed by them. For the first time in an hour, the Borg weren't looking at him. They were too busy trying to survive. He watched as the Holonoff shifted. The ship's silhouette sharpened against the stars as the impact strike lance began to glow. The view screen flared into a blinding hollow white that washed across the bridge, before finally resolving. "The cube is going critical," Maressa Jatal shouted over the alarms. Seconds later, the Borg Kingdom vessel detonated. The explosion filled the screen like a blossom of fire against the stars. Aaron slumped back into his seat, the familiar feeling of the command chair doing little to steady the tremor in his hands. The bridge erupted in cheers. Aaron let them have it. They needed the release. Even a temporary victory deserved to be felt, but he also knew what came next. He had heard the whispers before, usually spoken away from the bridge, where relief turned into scrutiny. People would search for patterns. They would search for someone to blame. To some, he was just an XB, a former Borg who had lost 2 ships. To Aaron, the word was a slur. It was a clinical label officers used to create distance, as if what happened to him could be reduced to a simple prefix. It implied that assimilation was something you could just step out of, like a change of clothes. To Aaron, he was not an anything. He was a man who had been dismantled and forced to function for a collective, then pulled out and put back together badly. Now he was expected to command as if nothing essential had been stripped away. But individuality did not mean the collective was gone. It just meant living with a memory of their hands. The voices never truly went quiet. They whispered, and closing his eyes only made him easier to find. Aaron straightened his uniform. He knew the crew was watching, searching for a commander who still looked like he was holding it together. "Admiral," Tovek said, his voice cracking just enough to notice. "We're adrift." The young Bolian looked up from his station, but his eyes didn't stay on Aaron. They drifted to where Sumin lay on the deck. He went still, his hands frozen and trembling just inches above the controls. "Sir?" Tovek whispered, his breath caught. "Commander Sumin, he's—" Aaron stepped down toward the helm, keeping his voice steady and low. "I know, Ensign. I see him." Tovek finally looked up, his skin pale from the realization. "Focus on the ship, Tovek," Aaron said, his tone softening. "He'd be the first one telling you to keep your hands on those controls." Tovek swallowed and forced himself to sit up straighter, pulling his shoulders back. It was the exact way Su Min used to carry himself. "Thrusters are still dead," Tovek said, his voice stronger but thick with effort. "I'm holding our course as best I can." Aaron turned to the comm panel. "Sickbay, this is Admiral Aaron. Medical team to the bridge immediately." Only static answered. Then a voice cut in, steady but strained. "Bridge, this is Lieutenant Commander Eshna Kabir Stiles." "Go ahead," Aaron said. "Sickbay was lost in the last impact," Kabir Stiles reported. "The chief medical officer did not survive. I am establishing a temporary sickbay in the mess hall. Any crew who can be moved should be routed there immediately." "Understood. Proceed with triage," Aaron replied. "Engineering says the warp core is still offline." A voice rumbled from the back of the bridge. Chief Engineer Kator Velen stood at his station. Being part Klingon and part Trill, he was a man who valued endurance over loud words. Su Min managed to shut down the core before the first hit. He was rerouting power manually right up until the console blew. "It is the only reason we are still here." Kator went quiet for a moment, his face hardening with a grim sort of respect. He died with honor, and he kept the ship in one piece. Aaron gave a single nod. He knew a Klingon didn't give out praise like that lightly. "Keep working on restoration." The reports kept coming. Kabir Stiles had turned the secondary cargo bay into a makeshift morgue. The environmental systems had been cut to keep the room cold. Storage crates were now used as partitions, and the floor was lined with rows of containment bags. "Sir, we're getting a hail from the Holanov." Lieutenant Jalen Tora said, sitting stiffly at her station. The red alert lights caught her Bajoran earring, a bright spark against the faint ridges of her mixed Cardassian and Bajoran skin. Her hands stayed steady, but she looked over at the body on the deck for just a second. Having grown up between two worlds that knew all about loss, she didn't look back again. She just sat there with a tension in her back that said she already knew exactly what this victory had cost them. "Open the channel," Aaron said. The bridge went quiet as the viewscreen flickered back to life. Chapter 3. Captain Arya Rachel appeared on the main viewscreen. "Aaron," she said warmly, "how is the Northstar holding together?" Aaron straightened his uniform jacket before delivering the report. "Multiple decks are currently operating on emergency power, and while the warp core is offline, it is at least stable. Life support is functioning at a reduced capacity, but our weapons and shield systems were completely destroyed during the battle." Rachel nodded slowly, absorbing the details. "We are dispatching repair crews and supplies from the Holonov." Aaron hesitated. The next words felt heavy on his tongue. "We have an unknown number of casualties. One of the impacts tore through the primary hull. We lost our chief medical officer, Commander Thalis Siobhan." Rachel's expression changed immediately. The lightness in her eyes gave way to a quiet seriousness. It was the look of a captain who knew the cost of the uniform. "I am sorry, Aaron. We will get help to you as fast as we can, but the Northstar is going to need extensive repairs. Dry dock at minimum." He had already suspected as much. Still, the thought of limping back to Earth's space dock sat in his mind like a physical weight. "One more thing," Rachel said. An officer stepped into frame beside her. Aaron froze, his gaze locking onto the man on the screen. Even through a subspace transmission, his presence felt more grounded than anyone Aaron had encountered in years. He was a Trill with dark hair and a neatly trimmed beard that lent a sharper, more defined edge to his jaw. His dark eyes were piercing, the kind that seemed to strip away layers of rank and history, with nothing more than a single, lingering look. The light from the Holonov bridge caught the deep tone of his skin and the intricate cascade of spots tracing the powerful column of his neck. Even beneath the structured fabric of the uniform, the raw architecture of the man was undeniable. He had broad, heavy shoulders and a chest that suggested a core of hard, rippled muscle. He looked less like a Starfleet officer and more like a legend brought to life. Recognition hit Aaron so hard it knocked the wind right out of him. "Commander Tarin Lyon will assist in the recovery of the Northstar," Rachel said. "He has multiple repair teams assigned, and they have already begun beaming aboard." Aaron felt his pulse jump against his collar. He forced himself to breathe evenly, relying on the discipline that had kept him alive this long. "Understood," he said. His voice sounded calm, even if his chest was tight. "There is more," Rachel continued. "The Holonov has been reassigned. Starfleet Command wants us to rendezvous with Kumar K and the Allied Task Force immediately. Reports say the Harmony is adrift in the Ram-Izad system." Unease followed. That was Tefei's ship. The timing felt wrong. It was too close to the Borg Kingdom incursions in the Kinja system. Rachel watched him carefully, as she always did when something mattered. "We do not know the condition of the vessel or what happened to the crew," she said. "But given Tefei's request for assistance and what we are seeing across the sector, Command wants answers." Aaron thought of Hugh. He thought of the warning he had given him not long ago. It hadn't been about the Borg, but about the Etherians. Danger did not always arrive with weapons charged. Sometimes it asked for help. "I understand," Aaron said. Rachel nodded. "We will keep you informed. Focus on getting your people through this." The channel remained open for a moment longer as the sense of inevitability settled in. "Good luck," Aaron said. Taran lifted his gaze, looking directly at Aaron across the distance. "I shall be aboard shortly, Admiral." "Aaron," Rachel added. "Stay safe?" "You too," he replied. The channel closed and Aaron sank into his chair. Taran Lyon. The name pulled a memory forward without warning. Risa. Years ago. Before the Dominion War tore the quadrant apart. Before the Borg encounter that changed his life forever. Before he had lost everything that made him feel human. The music had been loud and vibrant that night. He had drunk too much and had nowhere to be, free in a way he hadn't realized would be so fleeting. The dance instructor, Zero, shouted the next move while the crowd followed in perfect rhythm. Aaron did not. His timing slipped, and his leg kicked forward at exactly the wrong moment. He collided with someone solid and warm. "I am so sorry," he blurted out. The man laughed. "It is fine," he said. His voice was low and steady. Aaron noticed it immediately. They stepped off the dance floor and found the bar. Aaron kept apologizing while the man kept smiling. At some point, Aaron stopped listening to his own voice and started watching this beautiful stranger instead. He was tall and dark-haired, with a stillness about him that anchored the room. His eyes lingered on Aaron longer than required, heavy with an intent that made the air feel thin. The trill spots running along the side of his face were a mesmerizing chain of dark markings against warm skin, disappearing beneath his collar. Aaron found himself tracing that pattern, helpless against the visceral need to know exactly how far down they continued. The thought tightened something low in his stomach, a sharp pull of desire that left him breathless. "My name is Tarin," the man said, offering his hand. "Tarin Lyon." Aaron took it, his hand disappearing into a warm, confident grip. "Jonathan Aaron," he replied, his voice softening. "I prefer to be called Aaron." Back then, that name still felt uncomplicated. He let his gaze linger on the broad set of Tarin's shoulders, offering a slow, knowing wink. They talked for hours, drifting between Starfleet politics and the weather on Risa. There was an ease between them that felt dangerous in how quickly it formed. As the night wore on, the crowd thinned and the music softened. Warm ocean air drifted through the open doors of the resort. At some point, they stopped talking entirely. They simply looked at each other, close enough to feel the heat of shared space. "May I?" Aaron asked, his voice lower than he intended. Tarin smiled, unsurprised. "Yes." The kiss was unhurried. It was gentle at first, then deeper. Tarin's lips were warm and welcoming, and Aaron remembered thinking how rare that felt. When they finally pulled apart, neither spoke. The warmth of shared breath, the relief of being wanted without fear. It was the last time intimacy had felt uncomplicated. It was the last time his body had felt like it belonged to him. "Admiral." Maressa Jatal's voice pulled Aaron back to the bridge. "Sorry," Aaron said, standing abruptly. "Let me know when the Holanov's crew is aboard. I will be in my ready room." He moved quickly, hoping no one noticed how far his thoughts had drifted. The ready room was dim and heavily damaged. His favorite coffee mug lay shattered on the deck beneath his desk. He sat heavily and pulled up the casualty reports, telling himself to focus. It had been years since Risa. Years since he had been that man. Counselor Suna had spoken with him about this, how assimilation rewired intimacy, and how scars were not always visible. His body had been repaired by the best doctors in the Federation, but it had never been fully restored. The ready room was still, filled only with the low hum of the ship. Aaron pushed himself up from his desk, his back aching from the time spent reviewing the casualty reports. He walked to the viewport and watched the debris from the Borg cube drifting through the dark. The door chime broke the silence. Aaron didn't turn right away. He stood there for a moment and took a slow breath, smoothing the front of his uniform. He knew the fabric wouldn't hide how exhausted he felt, but it was the only armor he had left to wear. "Come," he said, finally turning back toward the room. Chapter 4. The doors to his ready room slid open. Commander Tarin Lyon stepped inside, pausing just long enough for the doors to hiss shut behind him. For a moment, neither moved. Tarin looked older than Aaron remembered. It wasn't just the passage of years, but a quiet gravity that had settled into his presence like armor. Standing there in the center of the room, his shoulders seemed broader, his build more muscular beneath the sharp lines of the uniform. The fabric pulled tight against the thick strength of his chest and the hard planes of his arms. He radiated a raw, masculine power that made the air in the small room feel heavy and charged. The familiar, intricate pattern of trill spots along his face and neck remained, tracing the strong line of his jaw before disappearing into his collar. It was enough to make the memory of Risa feel dangerously close. A heavy, visceral heat stirred in Aaron's chest. He found himself wondering if Tarin saw him the same way, and if those piercing dark eyes were currently stripping away the rank to find the man beneath. Aaron wasn't that person from the resort anymore. He was marked by time, wear, and a hunger for the man in front of him that he hadn't expected to feel so sharply. Tarin extended his hand. "Admiral," he said. His voice was calm and steady. "It is a pleasure to see you again." Aaron took the hand. The contact was brief and professional, but it sent a quiet jolt through him nonetheless. It was a tactile reminder of a connection he hadn't realized he was missing until this very second. "Commander," Aaron replied. "Thank you for coming aboard." "Given the condition of the Northstar," Taryn said, "it seemed appropriate." There was a careful distance between them. Two officers meeting after too many years and too much history. Aaron gestured toward the chair that had been knocked aside in the earlier chaos. Taryn reached down, his fingers locking around the frame as he hoisted the chair back upright. Before setting it down, he paused, his gaze catching a small, worn inscription on the underside. He looked at the letters, his brow furrowing in a puzzled expression before he finally set the chair straight. "Firkin's chair?" Taryn asked, looking up at Aaron. "Who's Firkin?" "It's a long story," Aaron said, a tired smile finally breaking through. "It involves a Packard who was convinced this specific chair was the key to making his ship go. He ended up accidentally blowing himself up that same afternoon. I've kept it ever since, just as a reminder of how crazy that day was." Taryn let out a short, quiet huff of a laugh, a smirk pulling at the corner of his mouth. "I remember hearing about that," he said. "Please, sit," Aaron said. Taryn sat, and Aaron remained standing a moment longer than necessary before taking his own seat. The room felt smaller with Taryn in it. Aaron's attention had narrowed entirely around him, drawn to the warmth of his presence and the quiet pull of a man who stirred memory and desire in equal measure. "I checked the logs on my way over," Taryn said quietly. "I saw the reports about your first officer and the doctor." "Thank you," Aaron said. "They were both exceptional officers. They will be missed." Taryn nodded once. "I will be overseeing the repair teams personally," Taryn continued. "Hull integrity, power distribution, life support. We will stabilize the ship enough to get you home safely." He leaned forward slightly, his eyes locking onto Aaron's. "I prefer to keep the critical systems under my own hands. I find that knowing exactly what I am touching at all times is the only way to prevent unnecessary complications." Aaron felt the double meaning land deep in his chest. "Chief Engineer Velen has already forwarded the system schematics," Aaron said, keeping his voice level. "He is very thorough." Taryn's mouth quirked at the corner. "So am I," he replied softly. "But then you likely remember that." Aaron felt a flush of heat rise beneath his collar. "I recall you were precise," he managed to say. Taryn's gaze dropped to Aaron's mouth for a fraction of a second before returning to his eyes. "I still am," Taryn said. "I do not leave a job unfinished, Aaron. You should know that by now." The moment lingered between the two of them. Then Taryn rose. "If you need anything, Admiral?" Aaron met his gaze and said softly, "Commander." Taryn turned toward the door, then stopped as if the distance between them had become too much to ignore. He looked back. "I am glad you survived," Taryn said. His voice was lower now, carrying a warmth that lingered. "The galaxy is too quiet without you in it." Aaron did not answer. He drew in a sharp breath. Before he could mask it, his face gave him away, a complicated wash of relief, longing, and a want he had not let himself feel in years. Taryn held his gaze for a heartbeat longer, then turned and stepped through the doors. The silence that followed felt heavier than it should have. Aaron remained seated, his hands resting flat on the desk as if they belonged to someone else. His breathing stayed measured. That was the problem. The calm came too easily. It was a reflex learned through repetition rather than peace. Aaron stood and crossed to the viewport. Space stretched back at him, vast and indifferent. The stars didn't care who had boarded his ship or what memories they carried. He had spent years convincing himself that Risa was a closed chapter, a version of himself that had burned out before the war, and before the Borg made his body feel like it no longer belonged to him. Seeing Taryn again had cracked something open. His reflection looked back at him, older and marked by the scars of his past. The faint silver outlines of his Borg implants were still visible, but he didn't look away. Councillor Sunna had once asked him when he stopped believing he deserved intimacy. He hadn't answered her then. The Borg had taken parts of him that no amount of rank could replace, leaving him functional and efficient, but nothing more. Intimacy now came with calculations and risks he had learned to shut down before they could hurt. He hadn't been with anyone in over a year. The last time had been with Kithrak, a Klingon science officer from House Escarath. They'd met at a conference on New Romulus. That had been an intense week of teeth and raw strength, a blurred line between combat and pleasure. Aaron had walked away with bruises and a cracked rib. He could handle pain. It was the parts of himself he kept closed off that unsettled him more than the injuries. When Kithrak asked for something permanent, Aaron had declined. He told him he deserved someone who could meet that raw intensity without hesitation. Kithrak was a storm of restless energy and unwavering focus. He moved with an intensity that demanded attention. As a science officer, he had a driving need to uncover the universe's secrets. For a long time, Aaron had mistaken that intellectual fire for the only thing that mattered. But Tarin was different. Tarin was everything Aaron had ever actually wanted. He was a quiet warmth that didn't demand Aaron be a scientist or a soldier every second of the day. It was only now, in a silence that had come far too late, that Aaron finally realized the truth. He wasn't afraid of the battles, or the Borg, or the cold vacuum of space. He was just scared of being loved. Aaron moved toward the couch before coming to a halt, his hands curling briefly into fists. The restless urge to find a task pressed against the temptation to just sit and let the world disappear. He chose the latter. He lowered himself onto the cushions and rested his palms against his knees, finally letting his weight settle. Tarin was glad he survived. Survival had never felt like the right word until now. His chest tightened. He closed his eyes and focused on his breathing, grounding himself in the present. The ready room was damaged but intact. The ship would hold. That was what mattered. After a few minutes, Aaron stood up from the couch, gave his uniform a sharp tug, and forced his pulse to level out. Whatever ghosts Tarin stirred up would have to wait. The Northstar and its crew were waiting, and they needed him to be the steady hand on the helm. Chapter 5. Aaron turned away from the viewport and stepped out of his ready room, moving through the ship toward engineering. The corridor lights flickered as he walked, dimming and then highlighting the bulkheads unevenly. He noted the mechanical struggle without slowing his pace. This section of the ship had taken the worst of the damage, and the systems were clearly laboring under the strain. A faint vibration carried up through the deck. The hull answered with a quiet groan that had yet to be silenced by repairs. Aaron paused briefly at the threshold to listen to the rhythm of the work before stepping inside. The low hum of damaged systems met him. At a nearby diagnostic station he noticed two crew members, Ensigns Rozhenko and Lohanda. They had arrived from the academy only months ago, carrying that mix of confidence and nervous energy typical of new officers. They were meant to be logging power fluctuations, but instead they stood a little too close. Their voices were low, and their eyes darted between the console and each other. Aaron watched as Rozhenko brushed a stray lock of hair back with exaggerated care. Lohanda pretended not to notice, but his eyes followed the movement with an intensity that gave him away. Aaron watched for a moment longer than strictly necessary, a faint smile touching his mouth. He cleared his throat. Both ensigns jumped and separated immediately. "Status," Aaron said dryly. "Stable," Rozhenko replied quickly. "Very stable, sir," Lohanda added. Aaron let it pass with a slight nod. "I'm glad to hear it. Please continue." They returned to their consoles with intense, performative focus. Aaron turned his attention to the heart of engineering. An emergency engineering hologram stuttered near the warp core, flickering as it repeated a VL-245 classified warning. It kept droning on about a cryptic message that would sound like gibberish to any other officer. Protocol VL-245, secure the nest. The ink is threading the primary optic. If the eggs are in the marrow, how long until the heart stops? Warning, the shadows have reached the nursery. Subtract the living from the dead. Silence is requested, the hatchlings are listening. Aaron knew exactly what that meant, and the fact that the holoprogram was even venting that data was a massive security breach in itself. He made a mental note to purge the hologram's memory the moment they had stable power. For now, he just ignored the hologram. He stood at the edge of the core with his arms folded, watching his crew. They moved with quiet precision, sleeves rolled up and arms marked by micro burns. This was what survival looked like. Commander Lyon was already there. Aaron watched Taran where he stood with Chief Engineer Velen. He had one hand braced against a console as they reviewed output levels. His shoulders were remarkably broad, anchored by a frame of dense muscle that strained against the fabric of his uniform. In the flickering blue light, the strength in his arms and the solid expanse of his chest were impossible to miss. Taran moved with a fluid grace, as if the ship were a natural extension of his own body. He understood systems as living patterns, his hands navigating the interface with a precise tactile focus. He turned before Aaron even spoke. "Sir," Taran said. "Commander," Aaron replied. Velen gave a brief grunt of acknowledgement and moved off to check a relay. "The core is back online," Taran said. "Barely. We reinforced the containment field and rerouted auxiliary power, but it will only last if we do not push it." "We will not," Aaron said, his voice regaining the steady edge of command as he straightened his posture. He looked toward the engineering station, forcing his mind back to the immediate reality of the ship. "Velan, give me an update. When are we going to have warp power back?" Velan didn't even look up from his console, his fingers flying across the interface as he tried to stabilize the flickering power levels. "I'm looking at 6, maybe 7 hours just to get the secondary injectors to hold a seal, Admiral." "We don't have 6 hours," Aaron countered, his eyes narrowing at the readouts. "Then you should have brought a miracle worker," Velen snapped, finally glancing over his shoulder with a tired, sharp look. "I can give you thrusters and enough juice for the structural integrity fields, but if you want to outrun a Borg Kingdom ship, I need time for the plasma to cool. You can't cheat physics, not even on your orders." "Then make it 3, Aaron said, his voice flat and final. "I'm not asking for a miracle, Velen. I'm asking for the ship. Patch it, bypass it, or weld it shut. But I need us moving before the Borg Kingdom launches another assault." Velen let out a frustrated grunt, his hands already diving back into the subroutines. "Fine. But if the nacelles melt, don't blame me. I'll see what I can squeeze out." Aaron watched him for a second, then turned back to Taran. The command mask was still in place, but his eyes softened just enough to be noticed. Their eyes met, and Aaron moved closer. He noted that they were standing nearer than protocol required, close enough that he could feel Taran's warmth. The incidental brush of fabric, as Taran shifted his weight, sent a shock through Aaron's body. "Command sent an update," Aaron said, keeping his voice level. "The Holanov has met up with the Harmony. Captain Rachel and her away team are aboard." Taran didn't answer at first. He simply looked at Aaron, his dark eyes expressive enough to make words feel unnecessary. "I read the report too, Aaron," Taran said, his voice low. "They lost contact with the boarding party about an hour ago." The space between them felt suddenly closer. "We're staying here," Aaron said. "The orders stand." Taran met his gaze. "They have to. This ship is in no condition to assist." The words were steady, but Taran's eyes held a tension they did not voice. Aaron's hand shifted at his side. He wanted to reach for Taran, to steady him, to offer something warmer than rank. "The crew of the Holanov is working on restoring communications with the away team," he said quietly. For a heartbeat, he did not look away. Taran's eyes held him, drawing him in with a physical pull. It felt as if Taran were looking straight through the uniform and into the part of Aaron that wanted this more than he allowed himself to admit. Ensign Rozhenko passed behind them with a heavy crate, forcing Taran to step closer to avoid the cabling. His hand lifted to brace against the console, and his finger brushed Aaron's. Aaron swallowed hard, the lump in his throat feeling like jagged glass. "I am just trying to keep everyone in one piece," he admitted, his voice barely a murmur. Taran looked at him, his gaze lingering on the strain in Aaron's face before he checked the console. "I know," Taran replied softly, "and I am right here to help you hold it all together." "We have hundreds of people on this ship waiting for a miracle," Aaron said, finally looking up from the flickering readouts. "I have to find a way to get them back, Taran. I have to get them home." Taran nodded, his expression steady even as the deck plates vibrated under their boots. "We will find a way, 1 light year at a time. We just have to make sure there is still a ship left to make the trip." The warp core pulsed and stabilized. The heavy vibration through the deck eased into a steady hum. The professional distance returned immediately, as deliberate as the closeness had been. His hand left Aaron's, and the absence was sharper than the touch. Velen leaned over his console, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "I can have the warp core up and running in 3 hours, Admiral," he interjected. "But that's assuming the primary injectors don't decide to melt down first." "Glad to hear it, Chief. Carry on," Aaron said. He lingered a moment longer to watch Taran move. Every motion was unforced, the work of a man who felt most anchored when he was making something broken feel whole again. Aaron turned and walked out, feeling the loss of that warmth with every step. Taran watched him go. He saw the Northstar differently than Starfleet Command did. The story wasn't in the logs. It was written in stress tolerances and shifting power curves. The ship was holding because it had been rebuilt to endure. In many ways, so had the man who commanded it. Taran watched Aaron disappear through the doors, noting the way he stood just a little too stiffly. Chief Engineer Velen approached quietly. "He treats the crew like they have the same tolerances as the hull," Velen grunted. "He's pushed people right to the red line his whole career. Are we going to step in?" "Not yet," Taran said, his voice steady as he looked at the chief engineer. "Leave it for now. Aaron is doing everything he can for this crew, Velan. Give him a second to breathe." Velan studied Taran for a moment before giving an approving nod and returning to his console. Taran turned back to the warp core. He didn't believe affection repaired trauma, but he knew Aaron was still standing. That mattered as much as any system readout. He would not reach for what Aaron wasn't ready to give, but he refused to look away from what was forming between them. He was not here only to mend a ship. He was here to see what had endured. Chapter 6. The doors to engineering slid shut. The thrum of the warp core dropped off, replaced by a silence so thick it made the dim emergency lighting feel even gloomier. In this corridor, the Northstar felt different. It was less guarded, less occupied, as though the ship had finally released some of the tension it had been holding since the first impact. Aaron walked without a destination. It was a habit he had learned from his mentor years ago. The crew never knew if he was on a formal inspection or just wandering, and that uncertainty kept them attentive. Sleep wasn't an option. His quarters felt too enclosed, and the silence there carried a weight that made his nerves hum. Every step echoed against the deck. The sound was faint, yet it was the only thing anchoring him to the empty corridor. He passed crew quarters where doors had been left unsealed. Emergency lights in the rooms glowed and flickered. The crew rested wherever they could find space on bunks or the floor. The air still carried a faint trace of smoke, a smell that was both familiar and unsettling. As he passed the mess hall, Aaron slowed, drawn by the soft light spilling into the corridor. What had once been a place for voices and laughter was now rows of makeshift biobeds. Lieutenant Commander Kabir Stiles had turned the space into a working sick bay. The air was heavy with the constant hum of scanners and the low murmur of voices. Aaron stepped inside. Crew members looked up as he approached. Some tried to sit, while others only managed to lift their heads. He moved between the beds, offering quiet words or a brief touch to a shoulder. "Good work holding that section. You will be back on your feet soon. Take the time you need." They weren't speeches. They didn't need to be. "Welcome to the very important person lounge, Admiral," Kabir Stiles said. She gave him a tired smile that didn't quite make it to her eyes. "The decor is temporary, but we're making it work." "You've done a lot with what you had," Aaron said. "We make do," she replied, trying to keep her tone light even though her hands shook while she organized a tray of hyposprays. "I wouldn't mind a proper sick bay next time, though." "I'll see what I can do," Aaron said. He looked around at the rows of makeshift beds, his expression softening. "You did a hell of a job getting this running on such short notice. They're lucky to have you." Kabir Stiles noticed the way Aaron was holding himself, his shoulder rigid and braced a fraction too high. "Hold on a second, sir," she said, stepping in front of him and putting a hand on his good arm. "Let's take a look at that shoulder." "I just bumped it," Aaron said, trying to turn away. "You are definitely not fine," she replied, lifting a scanner. "Hold still." The neuromuscular display scrolled across the tricorder, and her expression tightened. "That is a full dislocation. You have been compensating since the impact. It is impressive, but it is also very stupid." "It can wait," he said. "Absolutely not," Kabir Stiles said, her tone cheerful but unyielding. "Sit down before you fall." She guided him to a makeshift bed. "This is going to sting." "Understood," Aaron replied. With a precise motion she reset the joint. Pain flared white-hot from his shoulder. Aaron drew a breath through his teeth, forcing himself to stay steady as she applied a measured dose of analgesic. "You aren't helping anyone by playing the stoic hero with an untreated injury," she said with a sympathetic wink. Aaron didn't argue. He stood slowly and let his gaze move across the room. The mess hall no longer held the sound of a crew at rest. It held the sound of people who had survived. Kabir Stiles moved to her next patient, humming a melody under her breath as a quiet defiance against the dark. "You can't stop me loving myself," she sang softly. Aaron left the makeshift sickbay and took the turbolift to the observation lounge. He stepped out onto the quiet deck and walked to the viewport. His hands rested against the window as space stretched away in dark indifference. No red light, no voices, no commands, only the stars. He tried to breathe, but his mind wouldn't stay quiet. It never did. The old patterns returned, but this time they came with names: Kessler, Rao, Dren, Zhong Sumin, Thali Shivane. Faces replaced reports. He could almost hear Zhong's calm voice on the bridge. He knew that somewhere families were sitting in rooms just like this one, surrounded by the last normal minutes they would ever have, waiting for the words that would change everything. He turned away from the view, his pulse elevated and his hands curled into fists. He crossed the room to the desk. "Computer," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Show me the names of everyone we lost." The screen flickered to life, bathing the room in a cold blue glow. It wasn't just ranks and serial numbers. The list scrolled through faces, lives cut short in a blink. He saw friends, young officers he had promoted, and veterans who had survived a dozen other battles only to fall here. When the final name passed, he swallowed hard and straightened his shirt. He took a deep breath, forcing his posture to find its strength. "Now," he added, "prepare a message for the families." He selected the first name and stared at the empty field. To the family of Lieutenant Rena Kessler. He stopped, deleted it, tried again. "I am Admiral Aaron, commanding officer of the U.S.S. Northstar, and I served with your daughter." That line stayed. The words came slowly after that, shaped by honesty rather than formality. He wrote that she laughed easily, that she remained calm under pressure, and that she mattered. His hands paused more than once as memory pressed in. This was the part of leadership no one taught you how to live with. When he finally finished the last message, the room felt heavier but quieter. He had made space for the grief instead of fighting it. Aaron returned his gaze to the viewport. Outside, the stars were just blurred lines of light against the black. He tapped the comms trigger, his voice sounding tired even to his own ears. "Computer, open a draft for a shipwide address." The system chimed a ready tone. Aaron cleared his throat, trying to find the right balance between the admiral they needed and the man who had watched those names of dead crew scroll by. "Attention, crew of the Northstar," he began, then stopped. He leaned forward, resting his head in his hands for a second before continuing. "This is the Admiral. We've been through a lot over the last few hours. We fought, we held our ground, and we survived. But we didn't do it without cost." He looked back at the viewport. "We will be holding a memorial service for the crew we lost during the Borg Kingdom encounter. It will be held tomorrow in Cargo Bay 1 at 0900 hours. I expect all off-duty personnel to attend. For those on duty, we will observe a ship-wide minute of silence at the start of the service." He paused, his finger hovering over the button. "They weren't just names on a duty roster. They were our friends, our family. We'll say our goodbyes together." He exhaled slowly. End recording. Schedule for release in 15 minutes. Aaron stood up, the chair scraping softly against the deck plating. He took one last look at the stars, then tapped the console to darken the screen. "Computer lights," he murmured. The room stayed dim, but the door sensor chimed as he approached. He paused at the threshold, straightening his jacket. With a heavy exhale, he stepped out into the corridor, the hiss of the door closing behind him like a final note on the day. By the time he reached his quarters, exhaustion had settled into his bones. He removed his uniform slowly, folding it with a method born of habit. He sat on the edge of the bed, the room feeling smaller than it had that morning. He found himself thinking of Tareen and the quiet steadiness of his restraint. He remembered how Tarin hadn't followed him out of engineering, a decision that mattered more than he probably realized. Aaron rested his elbows on his knees and studied the deck plating, tracing the fine scuffs in the metal. He was afraid. For once, the Borg and the constant fighting weren't the things keeping him up at night. Instead, he was just scared of wanting. To want something meant dropping his guard and letting someone see the damage he usually kept hidden. It meant showing the parts of him that were still caught in the collective, the places they touched and never really let go. He lay back and stared at the bulkhead while the ship hummed around him. The Northstar held together through discipline and care, through systems pushed beyond comfort. Aaron understood that kind of survival. He closed his eyes, and for a brief moment it felt as though sleep might finally reach him. Chapter 7. The chime at the door cut through the quiet. Aaron opened his eyes and shifted into a seated position on the edge of the bed. The sound made his pulse jump, even here, even now. "Come in," he said. The door slid open, and Tarin stepped inside. He was still in uniform, his sleeves rolled up to reveal thick forearms that bore the faint metallic scent of the engine room. Fatigue sat heavy on him, but he didn't bother to hide it. His posture remained composed, a habit of control rather than effort. Then Tarin's attention caught. Aaron was not wearing a shirt. For a brief, unguarded moment, Tarin's gaze moved over him. He took in the strength of Aaron's shoulders and the defined lines of muscle that shifted with every breath. His eyes tracked the dark dusting of hair narrowing down his stomach. And then, the scars. The metallic ports of Borg implants were still visible against Aaron's skin, contrasting sharply with the human warmth beneath them. It was a body shaped by discipline, but marked by violence. Tarin did not just look at him. His eyes seemed to study the silver lines and the ridges of old wounds with a darkened expression that made Aaron's skin prickle. Aaron felt the familiar urge to cover himself, but he forced his hands to stay still on the mattress. "I am sorry," Aaron said quietly. "I did not have time to change." "Do not apologize," Tarin said. His voice was a fraction lower than usual. "I am certainly not complaining." Aaron swallowed. The air in the room suddenly felt very thin. "Admiral," Tarin continued, forcing his eyes back to Aaron's face, "I have a status report." Aaron nodded once. "Go ahead." "Engineering has restored warp capability. It is limited to warp 8, but the ship can begin the return course to Earth space dock. We are holding stable." Aaron reached for the comm badge on the bedside table. "Bridge, this is Admiral Aaron. Set course for Earth space dock, warp 8. "Aye, Admiral," Turvik Rel's voice came back instantly. "Course laid in. Warp 8 on your mark." "Engage," Aaron said. The ship hummed as the warp drive took hold. The subtle shift in vibration traveled through the deck plates and into the bed frame. Only then did Aaron look back at Tarin. Tarin hesitated, just long enough for the truth to surface. "I could have informed you by internal comms," Tarin said. "But you did not. No, I wanted to see you." There it was, plain and unguarded. No attempt to excuse it with protocol. Aaron rose slowly, the movement drawing Tarin's attention back to his bare skin. Aaron felt suddenly exposed, hyper-aware of the Borg implants he usually ignored. Tarin did not look away this time. He stepped into Aaron's personal space with a deliberate slowness. "I should have warned you," Aaron said quietly. "No, you do not owe me warnings. Not for this." Tarin stepped closer until he was standing directly between Aaron's knees. He was careful with the space, but the heat radiating from him was palpable. His eyes traced the faint lines along Aaron's collarbone and the discoloration near his ribs where the collective had carved into him. "They hurt you," Tarin murmured. "Yes," Aaron replied. There was no pity in Tarin's expression, only a steady, dark warmth. "I still see the same man I met years ago, the one on Risa. We shared quiet mornings, the same bed." He took another step. His thigh brushed against Aaron's knee. "I see the man who laughed too easily, who danced badly, who looked at me across a crowded bar like he wanted to consume me." Aaron's throat tightened. "That man is gone. The conflicts killed him." "No, he changed. So did I. That does not erase him, and it does not stop me from wanting him." Tarin lifted his hand, moving slowly to give Aaron time to stop him. Aaron did not. Taran's fingers brushed a scar near Aaron's shoulder with a touch that was firm and possessive. His thumb traced the ridge of an implant before sliding down to the skin of Aaron's chest. Aaron shuddered. The sensation bypassed his thoughts, sending a jolt of pure desire through his veins. Taran watched the reaction, his pupils blown wide. He let his hand rest flat against Aaron's chest, feeling the heavy thud of a heart beneath his palm. Then his fingers curled into the hair there, tugging gently. It was enough to elicit a sharp intake of breath. "You are still him," Taran said. "And you are everything that came after. I want all of it." Something inside Aaron gave way. He leaned in before he could stop himself. Their foreheads touched first, sharing a ragged breath and a pause that held years of distance. Then Taran kissed him. It was not gentle, it was a collision. Taran groaned low in his throat and crushed his mouth against Aaron's. It was hungry, wet, and desperate. Taran's lips were warm and achingly familiar, making old memories feel violently alive. Aaron answered with a quiet hunger of his own, opening his mouth and letting Taran in. He tasted the coffee on his tongue. He leaned into the touch, his hand gripping Taran's bicep. He felt the hard muscle beneath the uniform as he anchored himself. It felt like he had been waiting a lifetime for this. Taran's other hand tangled in Aaron's hair, pulling his head back to deepen the angle, pressing his hips forward until Aaron could feel exactly how much Taran wanted him. For one perfect, blinding second, the galaxy disappeared. Chirp. The sound was sharp and intrusive. Both of them froze. Taran pulled back first, his breath uneven and his lips swollen. He rested his forehead against Aaron's before stepping away with agonizing discipline. "Admiral," Lieutenant Jalen Tora's voice cut through the air. "Apologies for the interruption. Starfleet Command is requesting your immediate presence on a priority channel." Aaron closed his eyes, fighting to steady his breathing. "Patch it through to my quarters." "Already standing by." The channel closed. Taran looked at Aaron, his eyes dark and his chest heaving. "I meant what I said, every word." Aaron managed a faint, breathless smile. Taran nodded once and turned toward the door. At the threshold, he looked back at Aaron's bare chest one last time. "This does not end because we were interrupted, unless you wanted to." "It does not," Aaron replied. Taran's lips curved faintly before he exited. The door slid shut. Aaron remained where he was, his body humming with residual heat. His fingers drifted over the scar Taran's hand had warmed only moments before. The Northstar was turning for home, but his attention stayed anchored to the space Taran had left behind. Since his assimilation, he had always felt like something rebuilt incorrectly. Now, that feeling was gone. He felt open and unfinished, but in a way that made him feel truly alive. It did not take away from who he was. Instead, it simply opened up a space for longing. He finally saw that he was still someone worth wanting. Aaron reached for the uniform folded on the bedside table. He pulled it on, covering the scars but keeping the warmth beneath them. He crossed the room to his desk and accepted the communication that had been waiting for him. Chapter 8. The screen in Aaron's quarters flared to life before he had finished straightening his uniform. Fleet Admiral Emma Hyatt regarded him from the other side. Her posture was impeccable, her expression carefully neutral in the way only decades of command could teach. She looked at him with a sharpness that suggested she saw far more than the resolution of the screen allowed. "Aaron," she said. Her voice wasn't unkind, but it was heavy. "You look like hell." "It has been a long patrol," Aaron replied. He fell into the cadence of a formal report automatically, using the routine to hide the slight tremor in his hands. "The Northstar is underway at Warp 8. Primary systems are stable. We are en route to Earth Space Dock for repairs." Hyatt nodded once, glancing down at a pad before looking back up. "I have read the preliminary casualty reports. The numbers are high." "They are. We lost good people." "But you saved the ship," Hyatt said. "And you stopped the incursion." Aaron waited. Praise from Fleet Command usually meant something heavier was coming. "You held the line under extreme conditions," Hyatt continued. "Again." There it was. The word that never sounded like a compliment. To Aaron it sounded like an observation of how much weight a beam could take before it finally snapped. He felt the phantom pressure of Taran's mouth against his own, from only moments ago. The contrast was jarring. He was standing here discussing survival rates, while his body still hummed with the realization of how good it felt to be alive. "Starfleet Command is assigning an incident review once you arrive," Hyatt said. "It is standard procedure given the loss of life and the Borg Kingdom involvement. The review will cover tactical decisions and the status of your command." Aaron drew a slow breath, keeping his face still. "Yes, Admiral." Her gaze sharpened. She saw the tension in his jaw. "Don't give me that look," Hyatt said, her tone shifting from officer to colleague. "This isn't a witch hunt. It is an assessment. We need to know the Northstar is ready to go back out there. And we need to know you are too." "I am ready," Aaron said immediately. "Are you? You are carrying more than most admirals are expected to carry." Aaron didn't respond. Anything he said would sound defensive or hollow, and he refused to give her either. His mind drifted to the heat of Taran's hand on his chest. Starfleet saw his implants as a risk factor to be calculated. Taran had seen them as skin to be touched. "You will comply with the review," Hyatt continued, her tone hardening back into an order. "Yes, Admiral, I will." She paused. "One more thing before I let you go. The U.S.S. Braver has been diverted. They will assume patrol of the Kinja system effective immediately." Aaron straightened slightly. Trevette is solid. He knows how to hold a line. Hyatt allowed a faint nod. "Then you know you are leaving the sector in capable hands. You have held that line long enough. The crew needs time to recover. And frankly, so do you." She looked at him pointedly. "Get your ship home, Aaron. We will handle the paperwork when you arrive." The screen went dark. The quiet returned at once, feeling heavier than before. Aaron remained where he was, his hands braced against the desk as he studied his reflection in the blackened display. The review, the questions, and the familiar shadows all pressed forward again. But this time, Taran's face came with them. The memory of that hand against his skin brought back the way Taran looked at him. There was no evaluation or hidden agenda in his eyes. He just saw Aaron for who he actually was. Aaron exhaled slowly and moved to the viewport. Stars stretched past as the Northstar carried them home at a cautious pace. The review would come, and the questions would follow. The past would not loosen its hold, but neither would he. Not tonight. Somewhere aboard the ship, Taran was still there. He was still waiting. The promise of his touch felt more real than the threat of a tribunal. In that moment the rest of the world just fell away. Chapter 9. 3 days later, the Northstar arrived at the Sol system. It eased into the docking protocols of MC Kinley Station at 1/4 impulse, its battered hull catching the glow of station lights. Tow ships moved in to guide it the final distance. Docking beams locked against the frame. Clamps engaged. Aaron felt a subtle shift as the ship surrendered its motion. The Northstar finally accepted a stillness it had not known since the battle began. Aaron stepped onto the transporter pad as the procedures completed. The shimmer of light enveloped him, and in the next instant he was standing on Earth's space dock. He took a slow breath. He had left his ship behind for the first time in months. Earth's space dock never smelled the same as the Northstar. It was too clean, too bright, filled with a smooth hum of power that meant no strain in the decks and no vibration underfoot. The Northstar sat in dry dock behind layers of structural supports. Its wounds were exposed and catalogued. Aaron felt much the same. He made his way to the briefing room to meet with Admiral Hyatt. The room was windowless, dominated by a table polished smooth by decades of command presence. Aaron remained standing until he was told to sit. Old habits still served him. Fleet Admiral Emma Hyatt sat across from him, flanked by 2 other officers whose expressions offered neither hostility nor warmth. "Admiral Aaron," Hyatt said, "this is a formal incident review following the Borg Kingdom engagement in the Kinja system." "I understand," Aaron replied. She activated the display. Tactical overlays filled the space between them. Weapon discharge arcs traced sharp lines of red and blue to mark every torpedo launch and phaser volley. Shield readouts flickered, showing the moments when the Northstar's defenses finally collapsed. Casualty figures scrolled along the margins. 37 confirmed fatalities. 92 wounded. 24 critically injured. "You were outmatched," Hyatt said. "Your decisions delayed assimilation and prevented escalation into neighboring systems." Aaron felt the familiar grounding ache in his teeth as he held himself still. "I did what was necessary," he said, his voice dropping. "The crew held the line. That is what matters." "You sustained heavy losses," Hyatt said. The display shifted, focusing on the numbers. "These are not marginal figures, Admiral. They represent a significant depletion of both personnel and experience." "Yes," Aaron said quietly. Hyatt's hand moved again. The data was reorganized. "Your record shows similar patterns during previous engagements. The Shadows incident, Iconian conflicts, multiple other hostile encounters. New numbers replaced the old. 235 lost during the Shadows campaign. 112 across the Iconian operations. These are not isolated events," Hyatt said. "They form a trajectory." Aaron braced himself against the desk, his frame going rigid as he met Hyatt's gaze. "That is simply the cost of standing in front of the threat," he replied. "My crew fought where others could not. If you want to call that a trajectory, I will accept it." Hyatt did not look away. "I am not assigning blame. Starfleet does not measure success by the absence of loss. We measure it by whether command decisions reduce unnecessary risk over time." She met his eyes. "The pattern here suggests that you consistently place your ship where the margin for error is narrow." "Because the missions demand it," Aaron countered. "Or because you accept it," Hyatt replied. The words were not an accusation, but they landed with precision. Aaron drew a slow breath. "I accept what the situation requires. Nothing more." Hyatt regarded him for a long moment. "That distinction is why this conversation is necessary. Starfleet relies on officers who can endure pressure. But endurance is not the same as expendability, neither for your crew nor for yourself." She let the silence settle. "The question before us is not whether you can continue to command. It is whether the way you command is sustainable." "I do not take my command lightly," Aaron said. "I know. That is why I am asking you to consider how much weight you believe you are required to carry." Hyatt paused. Her gaze was steady. "My job is to ensure you aren't fighting the ship as much as the enemy." With a deliberate motion, she tapped the console. The Northstar's damage reports vanished, replaced by schematics for an Empress Miracle Worker Alliance juggernaut. A newer ship would offer improved survivability. It would give you the margin for error you're currently missing. Aaron did not hesitate. "No, these vessels are purpose-built for the kind of conflicts you are finding yourself in. They would reduce risk to the crew." "The Northstar already does that," Aaron replied. "It is held under Borg kingdom fire, under losses that would have broken something newer. My crew knows it. I know it. You do not replace that with a ship fresh out of a yard." Hyatt nodded once. "Very well." One of the other admirals leaned forward, his elbows resting heavily on the table. He didn't look at his pad. He looked right at Aaron. "Let's be blunt, Aaron. You have a habit of dragging a command across the finish line with the hull plating stripped off." "I know," Aaron said, "and you are doing so once again, while burdened by the weight of your past experiences." The officer's eyes flicked to the implant on Aaron's brow. "Starfleet Command worries about cumulative stress fractures, in the ship and in the captain." "I am not a starship frame," Aaron said. "No," the Admiral countered. "You are harder to repair." Hyatt interjected before he could press further. She sat back, studying Aaron with a look that felt like a diagnosis. "Your record shows repeated exposure to high casualty events, including your own assimilation. Most officers survive one of those things. You collect them." "I endured," Aaron said. "I adapted. And I continued to serve." "That isn't the question. Your competence is terrifyingly absolute, Aaron. We are reviewing whether the cost of you doing the job is becoming too high to pay." Aaron met her gaze. "I am not reckless, but I did what was required to bring my crew home." "And you did," Hyatt conceded. "But endurance is not an infinite resource." She paused, her mask slipping to show the friend underneath. "Ensure that the way you command preserves both your crew and yourself. We can replace a warp core. We cannot replace you." Aaron nodded slowly. "I intend to." "The Northstar remains under your command," Hyatt said finally. "Pending repairs. However, you will comply with a mandatory medical and psychological evaluation, and you will take leave once the ship enters the refit stage." Aaron blinked. "Ma'am, The refit will require my supervision. The chief engineer can handle the refit, Hyatt cut in. This is not a suggestion, Aaron. You have earned rest, whether you want it or not. I am not asking you to justify why you survived. I am ordering you to do the work required to live with it. Aaron looked at her. He saw no pity, only a hard, clear-eyed respect. Understood, Admiral. When Aaron stepped out into the corridor, the station felt like an assault. It was too loud and too bright, filled with the chaotic flow of life that continued without regard for the cost of its protection. Then the noise dropped away. Taryn was waiting near the viewport. He wasn't pacing. He was simply standing there, a point of stillness in the crowd. He didn't ask how it went. He just looked up, his dark eyes locking onto Aaron's with a pull that anchored him instantly. Taryn fell into step beside him, and they reached the relative quiet of a turbolift. "That bad?" Taryn asked. "No," Aaron replied, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "That honest. Honesty is usually worse," Taryn noted. As the doors sealed them into private silence, the professional distance evaporated. Aaron slumped, just a fraction, the heavy armor of his rank finally dropping away. Taryn moved into his personal space with a deliberate familiarity. He reached out, his warm hand sliding up Aaron's arm to cup the back of his neck. "You're still here," Taryn murmured, stepping closer until Aaron could feel the heat radiating off him. "You're still you." Aaron leaned into the touch and rested his forehead against Taryn's shoulder. The weight of his rank finally seemed to lift. He could just be himself. "They put me on leave," Aaron whispered. Taryn's arm came around his waist, holding him firm. "Good. Then I don't have to share you with the fleet for a while." Aaron let out a breath that was almost a laugh. He pulled back just enough to look at Taryn. "You're insubordinate." "I'm off duty," Taryn countered. He searched Aaron's face, tracing the exhaustion with a tenderness that made Aaron's chest ache. "And I'm taking you home." Aaron didn't know what the coming weeks would bring, or which parts of himself would surface once the adrenaline faded. But wrapped in the steady warmth of the man who knew his broken pieces, he knew one thing. He hadn't been dismissed. He had been found. "Take me home," Aaron said. Chapter 10. By the next morning, the Northstar looked like a stranger to Aaron. The ship sat still and exposed beneath the harsh work lights of the dry dock. Hull plating had been peeled back in jagged sections, revealing the internal structure like ribs beneath skin. Conduits lay open along the frame, and systems were tagged with a clinical precision that made the ship look less like a vessel and more like a patient. Damage that had been manageable in the heat of a battle appeared stark and ugly now that it was laid bare. Aaron stood on the maintenance platform overlooking the open warp core housing. To him, it wasn't just a refit. He hadn't come empty-handed. Resting on the railing beneath his palms was the Northstar's dedication plaque, which had been pulled from the bridge for safekeeping. Aaron traced the raised lettering with his finger, U.S.S. Northstar, NCC 1905F. His eyes lingered on the words he'd chosen when he first took command, built to endure, committed to those who serve. May this ship always bring its crew home. As he gripped the plaque, the cool, dense bronze felt as though it carried the mass of the entire ship. Its weight was a physical presence, pressing the familiar ache of responsibility back into his palms. Footsteps approached along the platform. Aaron didn't turn. He had learned to tell the difference between a crewman on a maintenance rotation and someone choosing to find him. Taryn stopped beside him, standing close enough to share the view but far enough to respect the silence. He was in civilian clothes, a dark grey shirt that fit close to his chest, emphasizing the breadth of his shoulders in a way the uniform never managed. To Aaron, he looked less like a commander and more like a singularity. He was a steady, inescapable center of gravity, pulling Aaron in with a force that felt as inevitable as an event horizon. "They are taking the ship apart," Aaron said. His voice was a low, heavy rasp that felt caught in his throat. "They are putting her back together," Taryn corrected gently. "There is a difference." Aaron gave a small nod, accepting the logic even as his chest tightened with a familiar, grounding ache. "You look like you are trying to hold the hull plating together by sheer force of will," Taryn murmured. He stepped closer until the heat from his body was a palpable presence against Aaron's side. Aaron shifted his grip on the plaque. Someone has to. Taryn's eyes dropped to Aaron's hands. He watched the knuckles turn white against the plaque and traced the tension running up Aaron's forearms. His gaze was heavy, carrying a weight that felt as tangible as a physical touch. "I am on leave," Taryn said, his voice dropping an octave. Aaron looked up, surprised. "From the Holonov?" Taryn nodded slowly. "Yes." "For how long?" Aaron replied. "As long as I am allowed," Taryn replied. A slow smile curled the corner of his mouth. "Or at least as long as it takes to finish what I started." Taryn's words carried a weight that Aaron felt in his own chest. He let his eyes linger, taking in the calm, open way Taryn stood and the sharp current of tension that hummed just beneath the surface. "You didn't have to request that," Aaron said. "I know. I didn't do it for the ship," Taryn replied. Aaron's breath caught. The way Taryn looked at him, as if he were the only source of gravity in the room, made his pulse hammer against his ribs. "I am on leave as well," Aaron admitted. "Hyatt made it mandatory for my evaluations." "I figured. Hyatt doesn't take chances with her favorite officers," Taryn replied. "I am hardly a favorite right now," Aaron muttered, looking back at the exposed warp core. "Stop that," Taryn said softly. He stepped into Aaron's personal space with a quiet, deliberate confidence. The raw heat radiating from him was intoxicating. "You are not just a rank, Aaron, and you are most certainly not just a casualty report." Taryn reached out, his warm hand covering Aaron's where it rested on the dedication plaque. His palm was broad and hot, the temperature seeping into Aaron's skin until the cold bronze beneath was forgotten. Taryn's thumb swept slowly over Aaron's knuckles in a soothing motion that contrasted with the raw hunger in his eyes. "I do not know who I am without being out there," Aaron whispered. It was a truth he hadn't even admitted to himself until the words were out. "Without the bridge." Taryn stepped in until his chest nearly brushed Aaron's arm. "Then we find out, together." Aaron searched his face. "You sound very sure." "I am. I have never been more sure of anything." Taryn reached into his pocket and drew out a pad, though he kept his eyes locked on Aaron. "I have the repair schedule, every bolt, every plate. The ship is in good hands, Aaron." He pressed his hand firmer over Aaron's. "You don't need to carry it right now," Taryn said, his voice a low, vibrating rumble. "Put it down." Aaron looked at the plaque and then at Taryn's hand. Slowly he loosened his grip, letting the tension bleed out of his fingers. "I didn't think you'd still be here," Aaron said, his voice barely a whisper against the hum of the room. "What, because of the schedule?" Taryn asked, a teasing glint in his eyes. Aaron's gaze lingered as he finally let the Admiral's composure crumble. He didn't try to hide the exhaustion anymore. "For not leaving. For being the one thing that didn't change." The air between them felt charged, pulled tight with the weight of everything they couldn't say or do on a public platform. Their eyes held, and a heavy promise passed between them. The absence of a kiss only sharpened the want until it became a physical ache in Aaron's chest. "I am not going anywhere," Taryn promised. Below them the engineers continued their work. Sparks drifted through the air like a slow, glowing rain. Aaron watched the movement, feeling something unfamiliar finally settle into place. Being on leave didn't have to mean being diminished. Sometimes it just meant standing still long enough to be rebuilt. He glanced at Taryn and saw a man who was fully present and beautifully unguarded. Since the Northstar entered dry dock, Aaron had been searching for clarity. He finally understood that his strength was not found in his rank alone. It was in the choice of where to stand and the person willing to stand there with him. Chapter 11. 5 days had passed. Aaron spent most of them alone in his quarters, moving through the quiet with a careful stillness. He read reports he didn't need to review and stood at the viewport longer than necessary, letting the hours drift without urgency. The orders were clear: mandatory leave, medical clearances, and psychological evaluations. No command authority would be restored until every box was checked. He read through the orders from Admiral Hyatt once, then again, before setting the pad aside without a word. On the 5th day, Aaron finally left his quarters. He made his way toward the promenade, which was already crowded with officers out of uniform and civilians moving past without recognition. He slipped through them unnoticed, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets. The absence of responsibility pressed in around him. There was no bridge to return to, and no reports demanding his attention. He settled onto a bench near an observation window. The curve of the planet below looked familiar, even if it had never quite felt like home. Earth had shaped his Starfleet life, but he had been born between worlds. Being half Betazoid and half human meant belonging in more than one place without ever fully settling into any of them. He stayed there until a familiar presence registered nearby. He didn't startle. He had already felt the shift in the air. "Aaron." "Tarin," he said, finally turning. Tarin stood a few paces away, out of uniform in dark pants, and a soft grey sweater that caught the light and softened the broad lines of his shoulders. "I thought I might find you here," Tarin said. "Were you looking?" Aaron asked. "Or just hoping?" Tarin considered the question. "Both." He sat down, claiming a spot close enough to share the same pocket of space without actually touching. The nearness was electric. Aaron became acutely aware of every inch of distance between them, a quiet heat building where his shoulder nearly brushed Tarin's arm. "Have you eaten?" Tarin asked softly. Aaron hesitated. "I have. I replicated some nutritional supplements." Tarin raised a skeptical eyebrow. 7 of 9 recommended them once, Aaron explained, a soft laugh escaping him. "She told me I needed to be more deliberate about staying functional. I'm trying to take the advice to heart." "Functionality has its place," Tarin agreed. "But joy has nutritional value too." "Joy," Aaron repeated. The word sounded dry on his tongue. "How about a drink?" Tarin's voice held a new lightness. Aaron glanced at him. "That sounds suspiciously like an order." Tarin's mouth curved. "It's a suggestion. One that happens to involve Club 47. Aaron studied him for a heartbeat before allowing a small smile to break through. "In that case, I'll comply." "You know Club 47 isn't exactly quiet," Tarin warned. Aaron stood, adjusting his jacket with a sharp tug. "I'm not looking for quiet. I'm looking for something that doesn't sound like the silence of my quarters." "That's a low bar," Tarin replied, a knowing smile touching his mouth. "You suggested it," Aaron said, already picking up his pace as they navigated the walkway of Earth's space dock. "I suggested a distraction," Tarin corrected, falling into step beside him. "The club is just the most efficient version of it." "Efficient," Aaron echoed, amused. "Of course you'd put it that way." Before Aaron could take another step, Tarin's hand found his. He gave a gentle tug, drawing Aaron forward with an ease that felt full of promise. Aaron let himself be pulled, his grip tightening slightly in return. For a moment, the world narrowed down to the heat of their joined hands. The doors to Club 47 slid open, swallowing them into a world of fractured light and pulsing color. They had barely stepped inside before a trill man in a sharply patterned shirt leaned in far closer than necessary. "Well, hello there," he said, his eyes flicking between them with practiced charm. "Are either of you Borg? Because you've just assimilated my heart." Aaron went still for half a second. Then Tarin laughed. It wasn't a polite chuckle, it was open and genuine. The sound was so infectious that it pulled a surprised laugh from Aaron in return. "That is the worst line I have ever heard," Aaron said dryly. "Hey," the trill replied, completely unbothered. "It works sometimes." "Not tonight," Tarin said easily, "but I respect the effort." They left the desperate trill to their own devices and claimed a pair of seats at the bar. One drink bled into 2, then a third. Somewhere in the middle of the noise, Aaron followed the lead of Nellen, the bartender, and ordered a pair of shots called Variance and Redacted 13. Variance arrived as a layered, iridescent swirl that seemed to vibrate against the glass. The flavor hit Aaron's tongue in shifting waves, moving from a sharp electric sweetness to a deep floral spice before he could even swallow. Redacted 13 followed it with a brutal, heavy kick. It was a slow burn of smoke and bitterness that didn't just sit on the palate. It settled deep in his chest like an old familiar weight. Nellen watched their reactions with faint, knowing amusement as he wiped down the counter. "If you are still standing after those, you might as well commit." He set down another pair of glasses, the liquid inside dark and still. "Invictus and Extinction," Nellen said. "My own creations. Invictus burns like resolve. Extinction follows colder. One tells you that you can endure." The other tells you what it takes. Taran lifted a hand immediately. No, that is more than enough for one evening. Aaron nodded, the warmth of the previous shots beginning to hum in his blood. Definitely enough. Nellan didn't push. He simply swept the glasses aside with a practiced hand. Your call. Some journeys are better left unfinished. The alcohol wasn't enough to dull Aaron's awareness, but it was enough to loosen it. He felt the tension that had been his constant companion finally begin to fray at the edges. Do you dance? Aaron stated, watching Taran with a mix of suspicion and appreciation. Taran's mouth curved. I do. Quite well, actually. I do not, Aaron replied. I've been told I move with the grace of a malfunctioning loading drone. Taran laughed. That is a harsh assessment. It's a tactical reality, Aaron insisted. Well, tactical realities can be adjusted, Taran said, leaning in. Besides, the lighting here is forgiving and I'm very durable. Aaron raised an eyebrow. Is that a challenge? It's an invitation, but you can take it however you like. The music shifted as DJ Grom adjusted the levels. The opening notes of I Want You by Savage Garden began to thread through the room. Taran rose and held out his hand. Aaron held the look for a heartbeat before placing his hand in Taran's, his fingers closing with a quiet, deliberate want. The dance floor was crowded enough that any remaining hesitation simply dissolved into proximity. Aaron moved with a practiced stiffness at first, but Taran stayed close, anchoring him. You're thinking too much, Taran murmured, his voice a low vibration against Aaron's ear. Occupational hazard, Aaron replied. Taran stepped fully into Aaron's space, closing the gap until the heat between them was a physical weight. His hands slid to Aaron's waist with a quiet, certain confidence. The contact was grounding, and Aaron felt his body respond, a subtle release of tension that happened before his brain could even process the intent. You are so beautiful, Taran said. Aaron's breath caught, his fingers tightening against the fabric of Taran's shoulders. When Taran kissed him, it was slow and deliberate, a complete rejection of the frantic tempo of the music. The room softened into a blur of colored light, until the galaxy narrowed down to nothing but the pressure of Taran's mouth and the steady, heavy warmth of his hands. When they finally drew back, they stayed tucked in close, their foreheads resting together while the rest of the world spun on without them. I warned you, Aaron said softly, his voice rough. I'm bad at this. Taran smiled against his lips. You're terrible. He kissed him again, brief and light, but I suppose I can overlook it. They returned to the bar, but the moment was shattered by shouting from across the room. Ambassador? Desperate Trill was saying loudly. I'm just saying if you have ever wanted to feel. No, came the flat reply from Ambassador Kyle, who was holding a half-eaten ham sandwich. I have spots, the Trill whispered loudly. They go all the way down. Do you want to count them? A massive Klingon bouncer appeared and lifted the desperate Trill by his shirt. I am flexible, the Trill shouted as he was hauled away. I like ham sandwiches too, find me. Kyle looked at his sandwich. Every damn time, he muttered. He took a bite, looking genuinely relieved, but the piece lasted less than 3 seconds. Ambassador Kyle. A sharp, distinct voice cut through the music like a phaser blast. A woman was pushing through the crowd, holding a recording device high in the air as if it were a beacon. Starfleet News Service, Eastern European Bureau. She shouted over the heavy thrum of the bass. Just one question about the Oberth-class decommissioning. Kyle froze mid-chew. He looked to the approaching reporter with a sense of profound soul-deep exhaustion. I am still recovering from the last interview, he muttered, his voice dropping into a low, weary grumble. He grabbed his plate and ducked behind a structural pillar just as the reporter swept past, her attention already pivoting to the next person in her path. Taran shook his head. Earth's space stock is consistent. Aaron laughed, and the sound was open and unguarded. It's a tomb compared to Drazana, he said, leaning back as the memory of the station's chaotic energy flickered. That place feels like it's held together by spite and bad deals. You can't walk 10 feet without someone trying to sell you a map to a treasure that doesn't exist. Taran chuckled. I remember a group on the lower promenade when I was there last. They claimed to be a traveling guild of dentists. It turned out they were using the privacy of the medical screens to strip the sub-processors out of every civilian pad that passed through. Aaron laughed again. Only on Drozana would you have to worry about a pickpocket disguised as a periodontist. When his eyes met Tarin's, that steady warmth was still there. The restless, drifting feeling in his chest finally went quiet. Standing there beside Tarin, he didn't have to guess where he fit anymore. He was exactly where he belonged. Chapter 12. They left Club 47 together. The doors slid shut, cutting the music down to a muted echo that barely reached the corridor. The air in the hallway felt cooler, carrying a stillness that had been missing inside the lounge. It felt as though the station had finally slipped beyond the reach of the noise. Aaron drew in a slow breath. He had been holding it longer than he realized. He turned slightly, meeting Tarin's gaze. "We should head in," Aaron said, his voice quiet but steady. "Tomorrow is going to find us whether we're ready for it or not." He tried to keep his tone neutral, but the effort showed in the way he pulled his shoulders back, the relaxed warmth of the evening cooling into a familiar, rigid professional distance. The weight of his command was already starting to settle back onto him, pulling his gaze away. Tarin held his eyes. "We do need to leave," he agreed softly. "But I am not ready to say goodnight." The words settled low in Aaron's chest. "Neither am I," he admitted. "Your quarters are closer," Tarin said, his voice dropping an octave. "We could go there. We could finish the conversation, or we could see if your coordination improves in private." The rhythm of the music was still vibrating in Aaron's bones. His pulse answered the challenge before he could find the words to deflect it. "You are welcome to test that theory," Aaron murmured. He didn't move away as Tarin leaned in. The scent of his warm skin and station air began to cloud Aaron's focus. The space between them was charged with a magnetic pull that made every breath feel like an act of restraint. "I intend to," Tarin promised. Aaron nodded once, the movement slow and heavy with certainty. "My quarters," he said. They started walking together, close enough that their shoulders brushed. The quiet between them felt like a countdown. Earth's space dock was calmer at this hour, though never still. Maintenance crews moved methodically, their tools humming softly against the deck. In the guest corridors, the station's constant thrum faded into the distance. At a junction, Tarin's shoulder checked his. It was solid contact, entirely deliberate. Aaron slowed, but Tarin was faster. A hand snagged Aaron's sleeve, and in the next heartbeat, Aaron was crowded back against the cool metal of the wall. Tarin leaned in, his heavy shoulders boxing Aaron in. His knee pressed between Aaron's legs, the hard muscle of his thigh grinding upward with a deliberate force that sent a jolt of heat through Aaron. Through the fabric of their clothes, Aaron could feel the staggering weight of the man, the solid plane of Tarin's chest, crushed against his own. The heat coming off Tarin carried a heavy natural musk that hit Aaron in waves. It was a scent that felt like an anchor, grounding him in the quiet space between them and cutting through the sterile, recycled air of the station. Aaron breathed it in, letting the warmth and the smell of it settle. "You are marching," Tarin murmured against his jaw. "Efficiency," Aaron exhaled. Tarin leaned in, his breath warm against Aaron's skin. "Overrated," he breathed. He let his fingers trace a slow, deliberate path across Aaron's body. His touch was soft. "I prefer the scenic route." His mouth captured Aaron's. This wasn't the careful kiss from the dance floor. It was hungry and impatient. Aaron's hands fisted in Tarin's jacket, pulling him closer, until the station's hum was drowned out by the pulse in his ears. Tarin pulled back to breathe. It was a tactical error. Aaron took the opening, tightening his grip on Tarin's shirt and spinning him. Tarin hit the opposite wall with a soft thud and a surprised laugh. "My coordination?" Aaron murmured, pressing his hips against Tarin's. "Appears to be improving." He didn't wait for an answer. He kissed the smile right off Tarin's face. Bright laughter echoed from the junction ahead. The sudden burst of noise cut through the tension. Aaron and Tarin broke apart, but not quite fast enough. Ensigns Rosenko and Lohander rounded the corner, fingers interlaced. The laughter died instantly, replaced by a silence so heavy it felt like a hull breach. Rosenko froze. His eyes bulged as he looked from Aaron's disheveled jacket to Tarin, who was leaning against the wall with swollen lips. "Admiral," Rosenko squeaked. His voice cracked. Lohander went rigid, pulling his hand back as if he had touched uncontained antimatter. "Commander, sir, we didn't." Aaron cleared his throat and smoothed his jacket. The attempt at dignity was futile. "Ensigns," he said, his voice perfectly level. "We didn't see anything," Rozhenko blurted out. "The deck plating is very clean today, sir." Tarin let out a soft snort. "You are dismissed, ensigns." They scrambled past, walking as fast as humanly possible without running. The corridor fell silent again. Tarin looked at Aaron, his eyes dancing with wicked amusement. Aaron stared at the ceiling. "That will be all over the ship by morning watch." "Undoubtedly," Tarin agreed, straightening Aaron's collar. "We should probably get to your quarters before we traumatize the rest of the night shift." They didn't make it 5 steps past the junction. Tarin snagged the front of Aaron's jacket and hauled him backward into a recessed alcove. Aaron hit the wall with a sharp exhale, and Tarin was on him instantly. This was teeth and tongue, and a hunger that had been simmering for years. Tarin's knee drove between Aaron's legs, pressing firmly against the sensitive seam of his trousers. "Now," Tarin growled against his neck. "We can carry on." The walk to the quarters was a blur of friction. The moment the door hissed shut, the pretense of patience evaporated. Tarin kept the room dimmed to a soft nocturnal glow and crowded Aaron against the closed door. Their hands were desperate, tangling in hair and working at clasps. "The undershirt," Aaron managed. "It sticks." "Not for long," Tarin replied. Tarin's hands were hot. When he pulled the shirt up, Aaron froze. The old reflex to hide kicked in. The dim light caught the lines of his frame, the graying flesh where implants had been torn out, the metallic ports that still studded his ribs like cold stars. Aaron braced himself for the hesitation. Tarin dropped to his knees. He didn't look away. He pressed his face against Aaron's stomach, the friction of his beard scraping over Aaron's skin. His hands gripped Aaron's hips. Tarin kissed a faded surgical line, then another, his movements deliberate. When Tarin's mouth finally pressed against the cool metal of a subdermal port, Aaron felt the vibration of a low growl deep in the man's throat. Aaron's knees buckled. His fingers dug into Tarin's shoulders. "God," he choked out. Tarin looked up, his eyes dark. "I'm going to take my time with you, Aaron. I want to feel every part of us coming back together." They tumbled onto the mattress in a tangle of limbs. Aaron felt his tactical mind finally go offline. There was no strategy here, only the weight of Tarin's body and the slide of sweat. Tarin moved with a demand that Aaron answered in kind. Every touch was a claim. When Aaron tightened, Tarin anchored him, holding him down until Aaron finally unraveled completely. The frantic energy eventually bled into a heavy exhaustion. Tarin lay on his back, one arm draped heavily across Aaron's waist. Aaron was curled against him, his skin feeling alive in a way it rarely did. "I'm glad you are here," Aaron whispered. Tarin shifted, pressing a kiss to the top of Aaron's hair. "There is nowhere else I would be." "I forget this sometimes," Aaron admitted. "What it feels like to just shut down." "I will remind you," Tarin replied, "as often as it takes." Aaron lifted his head to look at him. Stay with me tonight." Tarin's expression softened. "I'm not going anywhere." Slowly the armor Aaron wore so tightly finally loosened. In Tarin's steady presence the silence was no longer heavy. It was just peace. Sleep came easily to him, a rare gift after so many years of unrest. Chapter 13. The lights in the quarters hummed to life, casting a dim amber glow against the bulkheads. Aaron surfaced from sleep slowly, drifting first into a deep warmth, and then into the awareness of the steady, solid presence beside him. Tarin's arm lay draped across his back, a heavy, grounding weight that seemed to pin him to the mattress. For a long moment Aaron simply existed in the stillness. He lay there, struck by the ease of it all, and how naturally his body synced with the rhythm of Tarin's breathing. It was as if a jagged piece of him had finally found where it belonged. The internal noise he had carried for years finally went quiet. He found himself wishing the rest of the galaxy would just hold its breath and wait for them. He shifted carefully, but the slight friction of the sheets was enough to break the silence. Tarin stirred with a low, sleepy breath. His eyes opened slowly as the morning light caught the edges of the room, and he looked at Aaron with a smile that sent butterflies through Aaron's stomach. "Good morning," Tareen murmured, his voice rough with sleep. "Good morning," Aaron replied softly. Tareen's hand slid along Aaron's back. His touch was warm and soft against Aaron's skin. "Did I fall asleep like this?" "You did," Aaron said with a lazy, breathless huff of laughter. "I had no intention of moving, but I didn't mind being held captive." "I could be persuaded to keep you exactly where you are," Tareen replied. His voice hummed with a playful warmth as he leaned in to close the distance. The kiss was gentle and lingering. Aaron returned it without hesitation, sinking back into the heat of the man beside him. "Your mind is already back on the refit," Tareen murmured, his thumb tracing a slow, steady path over Aaron's cheekbone. "Maybe," Aaron admitted, letting his eyes drift shut. "It's a hard habit to break. I have the same problem." Tareen's hand tightened briefly against Aaron's side, a solid grounding pressure before it relaxed again. "I'm currently calculating how many ways I can keep you in this bed with me." Aaron rested his forehead against Tareen's, letting the silence settle over them. "I'd like to see the data on that," Aaron whispered, his voice still thick with sleep. He shifted, tracing the line of Tareen's arm before pressing a slow, lingering kiss against the steady, rhythmic pulse at his wrist. "If you're looking for ways to keep me here, I can think of a few you haven't tried yet." They remained tangled in the sheets for a few more minutes, savoring the stillness before the inevitable shift back to reality. Eventually, Aaron began to sit up, reaching for the pad on the side table. He braced himself for the demands of the day. Tareen caught his wrist before his fingers grazed the pad. A low laugh vibrated in Tareen's chest as he shifted his weight, settling firmly over Aaron. His legs bracketed Aaron's hips, pinning Aaron's hand back against the mattress. "Absolutely not," Tareen said. His eyes were dark with intent. "You do not get to run back to the Northstar the second you open your eyes." Aaron huffed out a breath as the weight settled against him. He could feel the solid heat of Tareen's body pressing down. "You are aware that this is highly unprofessional," Aaron noted, though his voice lacked conviction. "I'll show you unprofessional," Tareen murmured, his voice dropping an octave as he leaned in. He dragged his nose slowly along the sensitive line of Aaron's jaw, a touch that felt like a deliberate disruption of every duty-bound thought Aaron had. "I intend to make sure by the time I'm done with you, the bridge won't just be a second thought, it'll be a distant memory." The pad was abandoned on the bedside table, its glowing screen forgotten. Aaron reached out, his hand finding the small of Tareen's back and anchoring there. He pulled him in, closing the gap until the heat between them was absolute, and there was no space left for anything else. "You are so warm," Tareen whispered against Aaron's skin. He ground his hips down, slow and heavy. "The rest of the galaxy can wait 5 more minutes." Aaron tilted his head back, granting Tareen access to his throat. 5 minutes, Aaron agreed breathlessly. Tareen smiled against his skin, taking his time to breathe in the heat they'd just made. He pressed a slow, open-mouthed kiss to the pulse still thrumming rapidly under Aaron's jaw, a final, lingering claim before he finally pulled back. He looked thoroughly satisfied, his eyes dark with a quiet, triumphant light. He released Aaron's wrist, but stayed straddling him for a long moment, letting the weight of the silence hold them both. "All right," Tareen said, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. He finally rolled off, though he kept a hand resting heavy and warm on Aaron's thigh, as if to make sure he didn't drift too far away. "You can look at your reports now, but do not think for a second that I'm finished with you." Aaron reached for the pad again, his hand not quite steady. The display came to life with a sharp glow. The list of tasks felt like a physical weight: mandatory medical evaluations, counseling sessions, and a brief meeting with Admiral Hyatt. It was a cold reminder that Command expected him to carry his rank without stumbling. He lowered the pad back onto the table, his breath heavy. The duty was already beginning to slide back into place, distancing him from the warmth of the morning. "I have appointments," Aaron said, his gaze fixed on the wall. "I know," Tareen replied. "You aren't obligated to stay for this," Aaron said. though he wasn't ready for the separation. "I'm fairly certain I'm not allowed to," Taryn said with a low chuckle. "I have a feeling if I stayed, your vitals would reach levels the medical staff would find unacceptable." Aaron started to shift his legs to the side of the bed, but Taryn caught him a second time. He slid his hand up Aaron's inner thigh with deliberate slowness. Aaron froze, his breath caught. "You aren't even pretending to want to get out of this bed," Taryn teased, his voice still low. "I am pretending very hard," Aaron managed, though he didn't make a single move toward the edge of the mattress. "In my mind, I am already dressed and halfway to medical. It is a very convincing performance." "I am sure the doctor is very impressed with your punctuality," Taryn murmured, the vibration of his laugh humming directly against Aaron's chest. He didn't pull away. Instead, he settled more firmly into Aaron's body, his weight a warm and deliberate anchor. "But since you are already there in spirit, the rest of you is mine for at least another 20 minutes. I would hate to ruin such a convincing performance by having you actually move." What followed wasn't a struggle so much as a slow, deliberate surrender. Taryn shifted, using his weight to nudge Aaron back until he was pinned against the pillows again. Instead of finding any real leverage to push Taryn away, Aaron's fingers betrayed him. They slid deep into the hair at the back of Taryn's head and pulled him closer instead. The friction of their skin, still warm and damp from before, made it impossible to maintain any professional distance. Taryn leaned down and pressed a slow, wet kiss to the sensitive skin of Aaron's stomach, earning a sharp, jagged inhale that broke the quiet of the room. The next 20 minutes happened in the tangled heat of the sheets, where the only clock that mattered was the rhythm between the two of them. By the time the room finally went still again, the air was heavy with the scent of them, and Aaron felt an exhaustion that no amount of coffee was going to fix. "All right," Taryn said at last, pulling back with a reluctant sigh. "We should get up before I decide to make you very late." Aaron fell back with a breathless laugh. His hair was a mess and his lips were swollen. "We should at least get something to eat," he said, making no move to get up. "And there is coffee in that replicator, if we are brave." Taryn's expression softened as he traced Aaron's collarbone one last time. "Agreed." The sonic shower was unhurried. The high-frequency pulse hummed against their skin, a vibration that transferred between them where they touched. Taryn washed Aaron's back with slow, heavy strokes that were less about hygiene and more about possession. Later they shared the space at the sink, brushing their teeth in an easy silence. When they returned to the main room, Aaron dressed slowly. The civilian clothes felt unfamiliar, lacking the armor of his rank. Taryn watched him from the edge of the bed with a quiet steadiness. Aaron paused, glancing at the folded Admiral's uniform on the chair. "Before I see Admiral Hyatt, I will change back into it." Taryn gave a small nod. He understood the need for armor. "I will be nearby," Taryn said, "not hovering." "That is exactly what hovering sounds like," Aaron replied. Taryn smiled. "I will attempt restraint." Before moving toward the door, Aaron detoured to the replicator. Computer. Replicate nutritional supplement. Aaron 47. 2 silver tumblers materialized. It was a formula 7 of 9 had recommended. It was efficient and entirely joyless. Taryn took one, took a cautious sip, and grimaced with genuine horror. "That is disgusting," Taryn said, staring at the cup with genuine betrayal. "How do you actually drink this?" Aaron's mouth curved into a slow, tired smile as he took a sip of the black, bitter sludge. "It serves its purpose," he murmured, his voice still rough. "I don't need it to be a gourmet experience." "That isn't a morning routine," Taryn said, staring at the tumbler as if it had personally offended him. "That's just self-punishment in liquid form." Aaron's mouth curved into a slow, tired smile as he took another sip of the bitter sludge. "Maybe I like the punishment," he murmured, his voice still low and roughened by the morning. Taryn's eyebrows shot up, a wicked, knowing light sparking in his eyes as he stepped into Aaron's space. He let his hand slide to the small of Aaron's back, pulling him just close enough to feel the lingering heat between them. "If that's the case," Taryn whispered, his breath warm against Aaron's ear, "I think the bed has had quite enough of your discipline for one day." Any more and the station would have to file a formal grievance on behalf of the mattress. Aaron's grin widened, a rare, genuine flash of teeth that held even as they moved toward the door. They walked to the quarters door. If the mattress wants to file a grievance, it'll have to wait in line behind the rest of Starfleet Command, Aaron murmured. I'm sure they all have a list of complaints about my discipline by now. He stopped then, his hand hovering just over the door's control panel. He didn't press it. Instead, he turned back to face Taran, his frame blocking the exit. The playfulness didn't just fade. It vanished, replaced by a sudden, grounded weight that seemed to pull the air out of the small entryway. He looked at Taran not as a lover in a shared bed, but with the steady, piercing focus of a man realizing exactly how much he was about to leave behind on the other side of that door. There is something I need to say before we leave this room, Aaron said. Taran waited. I care for you deeply. I always have. Taran's breath caught. It looked like relief. I never moved on from Risa, Aaron continued, holding Taran's gaze. I told myself it was safer. Everything after that felt like survival. This is the first time it feels like my choice again. Taran stepped into Aaron's space and brushed his thumb over Aaron's cheek. And I care for you as well. I have for a long time, whether I was brave enough to admit it or not. Aaron swallowed hard. I always thought you chose the uniform over me. Taran didn't look away. The admission was stark, stripped of the usual flirtatious armor he wore so well. I chose the uniform because I was afraid of losing you, he said, the words landing heavy in the small space between them. And then I lost you anyway. He closed the distance, resting his forehead against Aaron's, his eyes shutting as if to block out the rest of the station. I've wanted this for a long time. I didn't think I was allowed to want it again. Aaron didn't hesitate. He reached up, his hand steady as it cupped the back of Taran's neck, anchoring him there. You are, he said, his voice quiet but absolute. They stood there for a heartbeat, the station's distant hum the only thing separating them from the silence of the room. Taran reached out, his fingers hooking into the collar of Aaron's undershirt to draw him back in. It was a slow, unhurried kiss. When Taran finally pulled back, he didn't go far, his thumb grazing Aaron's cheekbone one last time. He gave a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of the Admiral about to step back into the light. Then they parted at the door and went their separate ways. Chapter 14. Aaron stepped into the Earth Space Dock infirmary, and Nurse Rasa didn't even look up from her pad before gesturing him toward one of the open biobeds. The Cardassian physician moved in with that precise, unhurried grace, her eyes already scanning the readouts on the wall panels before she'd reached his side. Admiral Aaron, she said, her voice holding a professional coolness. I am Dr. Rakana Damar. Please lie back and remain still. Good to see you, Doctor, Aaron said, his voice level as he settled onto the edge of the bed. I've spent half my life being told to sit still and wait. I think I finally have the hang of it. The corner of her mouth lifted just enough to be noticed. So your file suggests you're remarkably consistent at being a difficult patient to keep down. Consistency is a virtue in Starfleet, Aaron countered, watching as she calibrated the scanner. Or so I've been told in every performance review for the last decade. In a commanding officer, perhaps, she murmured, her eyes flicking to the data stream beginning to appear on the console. In a patient, it usually just means I have to work twice as hard to keep you from running back to the bridge before the sedative has worn off. Aaron leaned back, the biobed crinkling slightly under his weight. I just don't like taking up a bed that a person with a real injury could be using, Doctor. It feels like a waste of your time. The doctor kept her eyes glued to the readout as she adjusted the settings on the console. She tapped a final command, and the scanner arch hummed to life. It moved with a steady clinical drone, the light tracing over his torso and catching on the dull metallic edges of his remaining Borg implants. Any recent episodes of disorientation? She asked, her voice dropping the sharp edge for something more observant. Dizziness, blurred vision, or that feeling like your internal clock is a few seconds behind the rest of the world? No. Nothing beyond what you would consider normal for my physiology, he replied. Starfleet has a generous definition of normal, she replied. Aaron offered a tired smile. Then I am well within regulation. As the display flickered to a new set of graphs, the doctor's composure shifted. The modifications to your cortical node appear to be still working, and the spinal implants have finally settled, but honestly, the rest of you is a disaster, she said, tapping the display until the graphs turned a sharp, angry red. Your vitals look like you're halfway through a boarding action, not sitting in a secure infirmary. You're redlining your nervous system just to stay upright, and quite frankly, Aaron, your heart isn't 25 anymore. She stepped away from the biobed and crossed her arms, looking at him with an uncompromising stare. You are operating on nothing but fumes and old habits, Aaron. The battle is over. You don't have to keep your heart rate at combat readiness just to eat breakfast. If I see your adrenaline spike like this one more time, I won't just suggest a few days off. I will personally relieve you of command and have a security detail drag you to a shuttlecraft for Casperia Prime. You can argue with the resort staff about your uptime, because you won't be doing it here. She leaned in then, her professional tone softened. Find a reason to look at something other than a pad and stay there until your internal clock stops trying to outrun the ship. Aaron met her gaze, his expression relaxing into a weary honesty he usually kept hidden behind his rank. Rest and relaxation have never been skills I put much effort into mastering, Doctor. Then I suggest you move it to the top of your list, she replied, her tone sharpening as the data on her screen shifted. Her gaze paused, her full attention snapping to the scanner readout focusing over the curve of Aaron's neck. Now, stay completely still. The display flickered. She hummed thoughtfully. You have localized trauma here. She pointed to a small crescent of discoloration near his collarbone, faint but distinct against his pale skin. Her eyes lifted to his, clinical and unsparing. This appears to be a bite. Aaron's brow furrowed. He reached back instinctively, his fingers brushing the tender spot. The memory returned, Taryn's mouth hot against his neck, the sharp nip of teeth before the soothe of his tongue. That is nothing, he said, the denial coming out too quickly. I must have caught it on equipment. She passed the scanner over the area once more, looking entirely unconvinced. Superficial. No tissue damage. Only bruising. The pattern is inconsistent with standard equipment. The silence stretched, making the low hum of the biobed feel heavy. Rakana regarded him for a long moment, her expression a mask of Cardassian composure. Your off-duty activities appear to have been quite energetic, Admiral. A slow heat crept up Aaron's neck. He fixed his gaze on the ceiling. Do you require medical authorization for interspecies mating protocols, Admiral? Aaron choked on his own breath. No, Doctor. That will not be necessary. She returned her attention to the readouts with a look of quiet satisfaction. The scanner retracted with a soft whir. The scans are clear enough that I'm not grounding you today, but don't take that as a victory, she said, finally stepping back from the display. I see no reason to restrict your duty status, provided you start looking after yourself with the same obsession you give your ship. Take some R&R, Aaron. Real rest, not just reading reports in a different chair. I will, he said quietly. Leaving the sterile medical wing, Aaron turned toward counseling. The air was warmer here, the lighting softer. It was designed to disarm, which was exactly why Aaron hated it. Counselor Suna was waiting. A trill with a stillness that suggested several lifetimes of experience. Admiral, she said. Aaron took the seat opposite her, hands on his knees. He looked ready for a court-martial. You are radiating tension today, Aaron, Suna observed. You are sitting as if you expect the chair to attack you. I am undergoing a fitness for duty evaluation. Caution is prudent. Caution is a defense mechanism. Is the caution for my benefit or for Starfleet Command? Aaron met her gaze. They are the same thing, are they not? Suna sighed and leaned back. How are you sleeping? And please do not tell me it is efficient. Aaron's eyes drifted to the plants on the shelf. I sleep. But the regeneration cycle is complex. When the ship is quiet, my mind tries to fill the void. With the collective? She replied. With static. Memories of things I did not do but remember doing anyway. Aaron tightened his grip on his knees. "It is manageable," he replied. "Manageable. You use that word often. It implies you are enduring your life rather than living it," she replied. "I am an admiral." "Endurance is the job description," he replied. "I have lived 7 lives, Aaron," Suna said, her eyes appearing ancient despite her youthful face. "I know the difference between coping and living. You think being broken and being a commander are mutually exclusive." "I know how command thinks," Aaron said, his voice dropping. "They look for cracks. If they find one, they replace the structure. I cannot lose this ship, Suna. It is the only place where I make sense." Suna reached out and tapped the recording light on the desk until it blinked off. "We are off the record." Aaron's shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch. "You are still fighting the battles. You were assimilated because you refused to retreat." "I was assimilated because I failed," Aaron whispered. "And because of that failure, I became the enemy. That is the guilt speaking, not the truth. You cannot command a crew if you cannot command your own grief." Aaron took a shaky breath. "I am trying." Suna studied his face, sensing a shift. "Something is different today. You seem less fortified." Aaron thought of the warmth of the bed he had just left. He offered a very small, private smile. "I found a new anchor." A soft chime went off. Suna smiled back. She did not pry. "Keep holding on to it. That's our time for today." "Same time next week, Admiral." Returning to his quarters, Aaron dressed with practiced precision before accepting a hail from Admiral Hyatt. The screen revealed her in transit quarters at a distant starbase. "Admiral Aaron, this is going to be brief." She paused for a moment, then continued. "You kept your ship together. You made the right calls." "Not all of them," Aaron said. "No, but enough," she said, her expression shifting from a colleague's concern to a superior's finality. "Your medical clearance is officially conditional. You're staying on leave for as long as the Northstar is in refit, and that's not a request. As for Commander Leon, he's due back on the Holonoff in 48 hours. Aaron felt tension gather in his shoulders. "Understood." Hyatt paused for a moment, clasping her hands together in front of her before continuing. "Command knows about the two of you," Hyatt said, her tone flat and unreadable. "This isn't about looking for a reason to write you up. It's about making sure your perspective hasn't gotten blurred." Aaron hesitated. "If this is regarding a report from Ensign Rozhenko." Hyatt paused, looking genuinely confused. "Ensign Rozhenko? Who is Ensign Rozhenko?" Aaron blinked. Never mind. I assumed a report had been filed regarding a corridor interaction." "No," Hyatt said slowly, a dawn of realization crossing her face. "That is not the source, though I am certainly curious now. One of my colleagues was in Club 47 last night. They witnessed the two of you on the dance floor." Aaron drew a slow breath. He remembered the flashing lights, the way he had let Taran hold him. "It appears we were less discreet than I believed." "You allowed yourself a moment," Hyatt said. "And from what I was told, you do not look like you regretted it. Lion departs in 2 days. Use the time well. I must be off to my next meeting. I'll see you around, Aaron." Aaron nodded, and the channel closed. Aaron removed his uniform jacket and changed into the civilian clothes Taran liked. He found Taran on the observation deck, watching the traffic of the space dock. "You've still got that Admiral look on your face," Taran said, leaning back as he watched Aaron. Aaron let out a short, heavy breath and rubbed the back of his neck. "Hard habit to break," he admitted, finally letting his shoulders drop. "Especially after the morning I've had." "You know," Aaron said, a trace of a dry smile finally breaking through his professional mask, "I think you were right about that formal grievance, though it didn't come from the mattress." Taran looked up, his interest clearly piqued as he set aside what he was doing. "Oh? Don't tell me Rozhenko actually filed one about what he saw last night." "Not Rozhenko," Aaron said, the last bit of humor draining from his face. "It was a fleet admiral who was in Club 47 at the same time as us. Hyatt didn't give me the full play-by-play, but they saw enough, the dancing and definitely the kiss." Taran let out a sharp, surprised laugh. "You are joking," "I wish I were," Aaron replied. "Well," Taran said, a grin spreading, "at least we gave them a good show." Aaron looked at Taran, the silence in the room suddenly feeling much heavier. "You have to return to the Holonoff in 48 hours, he said. The words felt stuck in his throat, sounding far more final than he wanted them to. Taran stayed still for a long moment, the news seemingly anchoring him to the spot. 48 hours, he repeated quietly, his voice tracing the shape of the deadline. He looked away toward the viewport, watching the slow rotation of the station. Taran reached for his hand, completely unconcerned with who might be watching. "I'm here until the clock runs out, and even then, the Holonoff is only a subspace message away." Aaron didn't pull away, his gaze lingering on Taran with a weary sort of hope. "That sounds a lot like a promise." "It's a statement of intent," Taran said, his fingers lacing firmly through Aaron's. He didn't just hold his hand, he anchored him. "I see you, Aaron. The Admiral, the man underneath, and everything in between. I'm not letting go of that. Not now, and not for a few light years of distance." They stood together, watching the stars drift past the viewport. Usually those lights felt cold and untouchable, mirrors of the distance he'd kept between himself and everyone else for years. But looking at them now, Aaron didn't feel like he belonged among them anymore. He tightened his grip on Taran's hand, anchoring himself to the here and now. The uniform would go back on eventually. The armor would be buckled into place, and the Admiral would return to lead, but not yet. For now, he just leaned into the warmth of the man beside him, knowing this moment would be the foundation for everything that came next. Chapter 15. 3 months later. The Northstar remained in dry dock at MC Kinley Station. Aaron stood at a viewport, taking in the familiar curve of the hull as steady work lights moved across its surface. They illuminated old damage and careful repairs with the same quiet precision. His leave had not yet ended. Counseling sessions continued, and medical evaluations followed a rhythm that had become routine. Some days were easier than others. Some nights still carried echoes he could not silence. But he no longer tried to pretend that any of it was gone. That acceptance, more than anything, felt new. A pad chimed softly in his hand, drawing him back to the present. He looked down at the display to see a message from Dr. Boreas Roxidus Theopolis. To Aaron he had always simply been Doc. The attached image showed Boreas against the backdrop of an elegant sickbay, his posture composed and his dark eyes sharp with a professional curiosity that made it feel as though he were interviewing the universe itself. Admiral Aaron, I hope this message finds you in stable condition, both physically and otherwise. I am coordinating a Federation Medical and Cybernetics conference on Casperia Prime. We are seeking perspectives that cannot be replicated by data alone. Casperia Prime has excellent accommodations and surprisingly good coffee. You may find both relevant. I look forward to your reply, Admiral. Aaron lowered the pad slowly. The faintest curve touched his mouth. Some invitations were impossible to ignore. He picked up the next pad, this one from Taran. He didn't skim it. He let the words settle, hearing the familiar calm of Taran's voice in his head. Aaron, the Holonoff has arrived at the Nexus coordinates. A ribbon of energy drifting through space, promising impossible futures. The crew is fascinated by the theoretical models. I find myself less interested in the phenomenon and more interested in the quiet between shifts. The nights are strangely empty without you. I find myself reaching for a hand that is not there. I am where I said I would be, but I am also with you, my love. Taran, Aaron felt the pull of it. The Nexus promised perfect moments held forever, yet Taran was out there wanting something far simpler and far more fragile, the chance to come back to the man he had left behind. Aaron left the viewport. He crossed the quiet of the observation lounge and chose a seat instead of pacing. It was a decision that still felt deliberate. He no longer filled every stretch of silence with movement, no longer treating stillness as something to be escaped. Computer, open a channel to Commander Lyon. Commander Lyon is currently unavailable, the computer replied. Leave a message. He hesitated, then spoke, his voice softer than he intended. I keep thinking about you. The Northstar's refit is progressing. The warp core finally sounds normal again. But none of that feels complete without you here. I miss you, Imzadi. The channel closed, and the room felt a little quieter. The Borg had shown him what it meant to be reduced to function. Starfleet had taught him how to keep going afterward. Terran had reminded him that survival did not have to mean being alone. None of those truths cancelled the others out. They existed together, layered and imperfect, the way real healing always was. "Computer," he said after a moment, "begin Admiral's log. Supplemental. The Northstar remains under repair. Crew rotations have begun. Morale is stabilizing across departments. My own as well." He ended the recording there. Not everything belonged in an official record. Rising, Aaron made his way toward the exit, pausing once more to look back at his ship. The dry dock lights traced a hull that looked cleaner and more complete with every passing day. Old damage gave way to fresh plating and refined lines. It was not just being repaired, it was being upgraded. New systems adapted from captured Terran Lexington-class dreadnoughts had been integrated, technology taken during conflicts with the Mirror Universe, and Emperor Crusher was being repurposed. Their brutal efficiency had been re-engineered into something that fit Starfleet's principles. The changes were not subtle. A multi-directional artillery barrage system now lined the hull, and deeper inside, an agony phaser spinal lance had been built into the structure itself. It was a weapon born of cruelty, repurposed for protection. The Northstar was changing, settling into something steadier. It wasn't the same ship it had been a year ago, yet the core of it remained unmistakably the same. Aaron finally realized that both of those things could be true at once. He walked down the corridor with a rare, unhurried pace. There were no alarms blaring, no urgent priority one signals waiting on his pad. There was only the low, rhythmic thrum of power systems and a quiet sense of forward motion. Terran would come back, or Aaron would find a way to him. For once there was no urgent need to decide. The pressure to act immediately had simply vanished. He still carried the weight of everything he'd been through. He knew he always would. But the burden didn't feel quite so heavy now that he wasn't hauling it alone. For now, that was more than enough to keep him moving forward. Epilogue. 6 months later, the Northstar was underway again. Starfleet Command had assigned them to the Batrika Nebula. It wasn't a combat operation, that was the point. The ship was tasked with a long-range scientific survey of unstable subspace layers, a region known for gravimetric shear and chronoton drift. It was the kind of environment that required careful hands on the helm and patience at the sensors. For Aaron, this quiet, deliberate work felt like the right way to begin again. The hull still bore faint seams of repair. Most would miss them, but Aaron knew exactly where to look. The systems were steady, and the crew had settled. The ship moved with the confidence of something that had endured and chosen to continue. Aaron stood on the bridge, his hands resting on the back of the captain's chair. He didn't sit unless he needed to. Some habits remained while others had softened. "Minor course correction, Admiral," Ensign Rel said, his eyes fixed on the helm, adjusting 3 degrees to the port to stay clear of a gravimetric pocket. "It's a bit of a bumpy ride, but we're holding steady." Aaron gave a short nod, his hands resting easily on the arms of his chair. Out the view screen, the Batrika Nebula churned in thick, violent clouds of violet and gold, the chronoton drift shimmering like static against the hull. He could feel the slight, rhythmic shudder of the deck plates as the Northstar's thrusters compensated for the shear. It was not the frantic surge of adrenaline or the cold weight of dread he had carried for so long. It was just work. Every movement was precise and purposeful. After years of feeling out of sync, the rhythm of the task finally felt exactly right. Counseling hadn't been a miracle. It was difficult work that unfolded a little at a time. The process was often slow and frustrating, yet it remained necessary for his survival. He still had nights when sleep was difficult and traumas rose without warning, but he no longer treated those moments as personal failures. Starfleet had cleared him fully 3 months earlier. The clearance came with conditions, regular check-ins and mandatory downtime. He did them without argument now. He understood what they protected. "Admiral," Lieutenant Jalen Tora said, "incoming transmission from the Holonoff. Commander Lyon on the comms." Aaron straightened, his posture shifting not from tension, but from a spark of anticipation. "Patch it through to my ready room." "I will take it there." The bridge continued its steady rhythm as the doors slid shut. The space remained defined by clean lines and orderly displays. A coffee mug waited on the desk in exactly the place it always occupied. "Computer, open channel." Taran's voice filled the room immediately, clear and steady. "Aaron, I will be en route shortly. The shuttlecraft Tierney is scheduled for departure within the hour." His tone shifted, the professional cadence slipping into something warmer. "Captain Redshell sends her regards. She also suggests you try not to steal her chief engineer. Apparently losing me is sufficient hardship for one rotation." Aaron smiled faintly at the display. "I will do my best to disappoint her, but I make no promises regarding efficiency. Talent should not be wasted." Taran let out a soft laugh. There was a long beat of silence over the comms, the kind where neither of them wanted to be the first to end the transmission. "I'll see you soon, Aaron," Taran said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate murmur. "I'm counting the minutes," Aaron replied. He leaned back in his chair, a small, genuine smile pulling at his mouth. It was a look he definitely didn't use on the bridge. "You'd better be, because all I can think about is seeing you standing there by that viewport. Just you, looking out at the light. It's the only view in this entire sector I actually care about," Taran replied. They both looked at each other for a final second. Without a word, Taran pressed 2 fingers to his lips and touched them to the screen, and Aaron followed suit, his own fingers meeting the same spot on the screen. The channel closed with a soft chime. Aaron sat back in his chair. The silence no longer felt empty as it had for so many years. Instead, it felt like a period of waiting, filled with anticipation. He was done waiting for his life to happen to him. The decision to bring Taran aboard as first officer had been forming since Risa. It was a choice carried through years of separation and loss. He had spoken with Admiral Hyatt, and she had approved the transfer. Starfleet was willing to give them the chance to prove they could balance the personal with the professional. "Computer," he said, the quiet hum of his quarters filling the pause. "Begin Admiral's log. The Northstar has arrived at the Batrika Nebula and commenced a deep scan survey of the unstable subspace layers. We are currently navigating significant gravimetric shear and chronoton drift, but the ship is holding steady. Crew efficiency is at peak performance, and the new rotation schedule has been implemented." He looked toward the viewport, his mind drifting toward the shuttlecraft Tierney on its way. "End log," the computer chirped. Aaron leaned back. Some truths didn't need documentation. They just needed to be lived. He returned to the bridge, and the familiar swoosh of the doors acted like a reset for his focus. "Status report," Aaron said. "Systems are holding steady, Admiral," Maressa Jatol reported. "Chief Engineer Velen reports the warp core is purring like a kitten." "Good. Maintain those levels." Aaron glanced toward the helm. "Anything on the long-range sensors, Ensign?" "Mostly gravimetric interference and the usual nebula static, sir," Ensign Rel replied, his eyes never leaving the console. "The chronoton drift is picking up, but nothing the dampeners can't handle. It's quiet out there, all things considered." The usual hum shifted as a rhythmic pulse erupted from the communications console. "Admiral," Jalen Tora said, her voice sharp. "Incoming hail, priority 1. The source is identified as the Borg Cooperative." Aaron straightened. On screen. "It's good to see you, Hugh," Aaron said, a small, weary smile breaking through his professional mask. "I wasn't expecting a hail this far out." "I'm assembling a task force," Hugh said. "The Cooperative has been tracking Thacine Fey alongside our allies. We believe we know where they are." Aaron felt the familiar weight settle through him. It was a pressure that reminded him he was still capable of leading. "I need you at Deep Space Nine. There is evidence of Etherian starship sabotage. I am counting on the Northstar, your crew, and you." Aaron took a slow look around the bridge, meeting the eyes of the crew who had chosen to stand by him through all of it. "We'll be there," he replied. The channel closed. Aaron remained standing with one hand on the back of the captain's chair. Some journeys had ended, others were only just beginning. 6 months later, he was still here and still loved. "Jalen," Aaron said. "Notify First Officer Lyon. Have him change course and meet us at Deep Space Nine." "Yes, Admiral," she replied. Aaron straightened. "Helm, change course for Deep Space Nine. Maximum warp. Aye, sir. Course laid in." "Maximum warp," Rel replied. "Engage," Aaron said. The stars stretched out, blurring into long, brilliant streaks of white, as the ship went to warp. The Northstar felt different this time. It felt steadier, as if the ship itself had finally found its footing. It was no longer just about hauling a crew and a mission into the dark. He carried a quiet, solid certainty instead. Aaron was finally not making the journey alone. The end.
Northstar engage.
Cradle of the stars is calling out his name. The ship slips back into the velvet flame. No more ghosts in the static, no more shadows in the hall. The commander standing steady, standing tall.
The void used to be a graveyard of the soul, but the pieces of the man are finally whole.
And the Northstar voyage continues on
Into the glow of a brand new dawn, with an anchor to hold him, a crew to carry the weight. He's no longer drifting, he's steering his fate. The journey isn't duty, it's a love for the view of a future he believes in, shining and new.
The stars begin to stretch, the white lines blur. The engine hums a promise, a steady rhythmic purr.
Every light year closer to the station in the deep is a promise to the living that he's gonna keep.
And the Northstar voyage continues on
Into the glow of a brand new dawn, with an anchor to hold him, a crew to carry the weight. He's no longer drifting, he's steering his fate. The journey isn't duty, it's a love for the view of a future he believes in, shining and new.
maximum warp through the silent night, finding his peace in the speed of light. Deep Space Nine is a long way to go, but he's finally home in the afterglow. And the Northstar voyage continues on into the glow of a brand new dawn, with an anchor to hold him, a crew to carry the weight. He's no longer drifting, he's steering his fate. The journey isn't duty, it's a love for the view of a future he believes in, shining and
Appendix the Fund, Principal Crew and Characters, Admiral Jonathan Aaron. Species, half human, half Betazoid. Role, Commanding Officer, U.S.S. Northstar. Status: active duty. A Starfleet officer and former Borg drone whose survival and recovery shape both his leadership and his private life. Raised between Earth and Bataised, he navigates two cultures that taught him emotional awareness and disciplined restraint. He possesses limited psionic abilities inherited from his Betazoid heritage. Aaron is known for a controlled command presence, sharp observational skills, and a deep sense of responsibility forged through high-casualty engagements. Following the Borg Kingdom conflict in the Kinja system, he underwent extended medical and psychological evaluation. He explicitly refused a transfer to a newer vessel, choosing instead to oversee the repair and refit of the Northstar. His relationship with Commander Taran Leon remains a defining personal anchor. Commander Taran Leon, species, join Trill. Role: First Officer, U.S.S. Northstar, formerly Engineer, U.S.S. Holanoff. Status: active duty, an engineer whose career has spanned some of the fleet's most demanding deep space assignments. Formerly assigned to the Holanoff, he accepted the appointment as First Officer of the Northstar by choice rather than convenience. Known for restraint and precision, Taran brings stability to both systems and people. He shares a long, complicated personal history with Admiral Aaron that began on Risa before the Dominion War, a connection shaped by years of separation, survival, and the ultimate choice to return to one another. Captain Aria Retchel. Species: human. Role: Commanding Officer, U.S.S. Holanoff. Status: active duty. The commanding officer of one of Starfleet's most formidable modern vessels. Raised along the rugged Atlantic coastline of Nova Scotia, she possesses an unshakable presence and a habit of measuring risk before committing to action. Retchel is known for sharp tactical insight and an uncommon ability to read her officers. She granted Taran Leon leave during the Northstar refit and later approved his transfer, choosing trust in her officer over rigid adherence to appearances. Fleet Admiral Emma Hyatt. Species: human. Role: Starfleet Command Fleet Admiral. Status: active duty, responsible for high-level incident reviews and strategic personnel transfers. Known for procedural fairness, she has served as one of Aaron's primary oversight authorities since his recovery from assimilation. Hyatt is one of the few admirals willing to balance Starfleet protocol with personal accountability. She approved Aaron's return to active command because she recognized that stability in leadership sometimes requires trust as much as structure. Lieutenant Commander Eshna Kabir Stiles. Species: human. Role: Chief Medical Officer, U.S.S. Northstar, the senior medical officer who assumed emergency command following the destruction of sickbay during the Borg Kingdom engagement. She established a fully functional temporary sickbay in the mess hall and directed triage with calm precision. Known for decisive leadership, Kabir Stiles is also quietly known among the crew for her fondness for an old Earth boy band called BTS, a human detail that contrasts with her clinical professionalism. Zhong Su Min. She's human. Role: former First Officer, U.S.S. Northstar. Status: deceased. Kia, Kinja system, a decorated officer whose career was defined by unwavering loyalty to Admiral Aaron. Raised on the New Harmony colony, his frontier upbringing shaped his practical approach to command. As First Officer, Su Min served as the ship's stabilizing presence. His death during the Borg Kingdom engagement left a permanent absence aboard the Northstar that was felt in the emotional core of the entire crew. Lieutenant Commander Maressa Jatal. Species: Cation. Chief Tactical Operations Officer, U.S.S. Northstar. Known for analytical precision and steady performance under pressure, Maressa favors clear action over display. She is valued during high-risk engagements for her ability to translate volatile tactical data into actionable options. Chief Engineer Kator Valen. Species: half Klingon, half Trill. Role: Chief Engineer. Valen treats ship systems as a tactical responsibility. Direct and unsentimental, he is central to the Northstar's ability to survive high-risk engagements, particularly during Borg-related operations. Ensign Tovek Rel. Species: Bolian. Role: Helm Officer, U.S.S. Northstar. Ensign Tovek Rel is a male Starfleet Helm Officer aboard the U.S.S. Northstar. He demonstrates steady competence and confidence, particularly during high warp navigation and post-refit operations. Commander Thalis Shivane. Species: Andorian. Role: former Chief Medical Officer, U.S.S. Northstar. Status: deceased. Kia, Kinja system, a brilliant but intense physician known for fierce advocacy for patient welfare. He viewed disease and injury as enemies to be aggressively defeated. His antennae were known to flatten against his skull when debating with command, a sign he was not going to back down. He was killed refusing to evacuate sickbay, choosing instead to manually operate life support for 3 critical patients. His actions saved those lives before he was crushed by a structural support beam. The casualties. Lieutenant Kessler, killed during hull decompression on Deck 8 to a 9. Killed decompression on decompression on Deck 10. Lieutenant Dren, an engineering specialist assigned to the Northstar, he was killed when a series of conduits ruptured, sending a bioelectrical surge through his nervous system. This surge caused his lower body to remain in a state of perpetual, rhythmic motion after death, a haunting and bizarre engineering anomaly. Secondary characters and allies. Counselor Suna. Species, Trill. Role, Starfleet Counselor, Earth Space Dock. Suna's practical and direct approach to trauma care is instrumental in Aaron's recovery. She provides the necessary friction to help him navigate the transition from surviving to living. Hugh. Species, Liberated Borg. Role, Executive Director, Borg Reclamation Project, a primary liaison between Starfleet and the Cooperative. Hugh recruited Aaron as an advisor to address the Thassin Fey and Etherian threats, recognizing that Aaron's unique perspective is a strategic asset. Ambassador Kyle. Species, Klingon. Role, Diplomat, known for a dry wit and a peculiar ability to attract chaos. Kyle's fondness for ham sandwiches is often interrupted by a persistent Starfleet news reporter from the Eastern European Bureau. Dr. Boreas Roxodus Theopolis, Doc. Species, Vulcan. Role, Starfleet Medical Officer, Cybernetics. Doc possesses a composed demeanor and a surprisingly engaging public presence. He invited Aaron to the conference on Casperia Prime to share insights on long-term assimilation recovery. Dr. Rakana Damar. Species, Cardassian. Role, Trauma Physician, Earth Space Dock. Damar conducted Aaron's post-incident physical. She is noted for her sharp professional wit and her ability to identify off-duty activities with clinical accuracy. Captain Jan Darkrider. Species, Human, Liberated Borg. Role, Commanding Officer, U.S.S, Alexei Krupnik, standing 6 feet 6 inches with. Visible implants, Darkrider retains a machine-like efficiency and refers to herself in the third person. She is fiercely protective of her crew of fellow liberated drones, the Sixes, and utilizes ruthless anti-Borg tactics. Kethrak of House Escaroth. Species, Klingon. Role, Science Officer. A former flame of Aaron's whose relationship was defined by rough passion and bruising intensity. Aaron's rejection of Kethrak's offer for a permanent bond remains a pivotal moment in his history, marking his struggle with deep intimacy. Ensign Rosenko. Ensign. Species, Rizian. Role, a quick-witted engineer aboard the Northstar. He represents the future of Starfleet engineering and is frequently found near Ensign Lohander, balancing his technical skills with a persistent romantic interest. Ensign Lohander, Nonsen. Species, half Romulan, half human. Role, a methodical structural specialist on the Northstar, known for his precision and focus. He often works alongside Ensign Rosenko, forming a highly effective but emotionally charged engineering duo. Nelan, bartender. Species, Elorian. Role, the social heart of Club 47. As a listener and bartender, he serves drinks named after existential crises, providing a rare place for reflection amidst the chaos of the station. DJ Grom, media personality. Species, Ferengi. Role, a prominent figure in the station's nightlife. Rumored to be the son of Quark and Pell, he manages the entertainment and pulse of the local club scene through his media influence. Emperor Wesley Crusher. Terran Emperor. Species, Terran. Role, a godlike tyrant and ruler of the Terran Empire. By merging with the other, he gained vast psionic powers, making him an existential threat capable of dismantling entire starship fleets with a single thought. Nurse Rasa. Lieutenant. Species, Saurian. Role, Starfleet officer serving as a nurse within the Federation. She is stationed in the infirmary of Earth Space Dock, Kumake, Captain. Species, Lukari. Role, a scientist and diplomat who rose to become one of the most prominent leaders of the Lucari people. As the commanding officer of the Lucari Hokun-class science vessel, she played a crucial role in her species' transition from a secluded world to an influential spacefaring power. She is a core member of the Khitomer Alliance, frequently spearheading research and defense initiatives against threats like the Tsankithi, the Hurak, and the Terran Empire. Thasin Fei, leader. Species, Etherian. Role, commanding officer of the Starship Harmony and a high-ranking leader within the Etherian Concordium. She serves as a vital multiversal liaison, coordinating with the Khitomer Alliance to counter Borg Kingdom incursions across different realities. Captain Rory Trevitt. Species, human. Role, commanding officer of the U.S.S. Braver, an Ottawa-born officer who served with Aaron during the Iconian aftermath. He relieved the Northstar to patrol the Kinger system. Desperate Trill. Species, Trill. Role, an unnamed civilian whose persistent, unsuccessful flirtation attempts provide comic relief on Earth's space dock. 7 of 9. Commander and Fenris Ranger. Species, human, Borg XP. Role, a survivor of 18 years within the collective. She serves as a vital bridge between Federation ideals and the harsh realities of the frontier. After years with the crew of the U.S.S. Voyager, she eventually found her calling as a protector in the Romulan neutral zone. She is defined by her vast technical expertise and the fierce independence of a woman who reclaimed her humanity. Starfleet Reporter, Eastern European Bureau. Dispatch Note, Ken 047. The following entry is archived within the Eastern European Bureau of the Federation News Network. While the Bureau is known for its investigative reporting across the quadrant, this specific annex serves as a permanent nod to the long-standing history between our staff and the Fleet Command. Certain recurring anomalies in our reports regarding the origins of the command staff are to be treated with the usual Bureau skepticism. This entry remains a private inside joke between the former community manager Ambassador Kyle and STO Admiral Aaron. It serves as a reminder of the time Kyle spent months convinced that Aaron was actually operating out of the Eastern European Bureau rather than his true post in Canada. Appendix 2. Starships and Stations. U.S.S. Northstar, NCC 1905F. Class, Odyssey-class tactical star cruiser. Command, Admiral Aaron. The primary setting of the narrative, the Northstar, is a resilient Federation flagship designed for deep space exploration and tactical deterrence. After sustaining catastrophic damage during the Borg Kingdom engagement in the Kinger system, it required an extensive layover at MC Kinley Station. Refit upgrades. During its repair, the ship was retrofitted with adapted Terran Empire technology. This includes a multi-directional artillery barrage system and an Agony phaser spinal lance. These upgrades provide devastating offensive capabilities. U.S.S. Hollenoff, NCC 81240A. Class, Trafalgar-class Command, Juggernaut. Command, Captain Arya Rachel, one of Starfleet's newest and most formidable vessels. The Hollenoff is a dreadnought designed for sustained fleet coordination and heavy defensive operations. It served as Commander Taron Lyon's duty assignment prior to his transfer. While the Northstar was in dry dock, the Hollenoff continued independent missions, including a long-range analysis of the Nexus energy ribbon. U.S.S. Braver. 2170A. Class, Concorde-class Operations Command Battlecruiser. Command, Captain Rory Trevitt. Built for durability and rapid response. The Braver is frequently tasked with high-risk deployments along contested Federation borders. It assumed patrol duties in the Kinger sector, following the Northstar's withdrawal. Its service record focuses on fleet support and convoy protection in regions where stability cannot be assumed. Shuttlecraft Tierney, NCC 8,124,001. Type 14 Shuttlecraft, a compact support craft used for short range. Personnel transfer. It served as the literal vehicle for the reunion between Admiral Aaron and Taron Lyon, transporting the commander from the Hollenoff to the Northstar in the Batrika Nebula. Key installations: Earth Space Dock, ESD. Location: Solar System, Earth Orbit. The orbital station serves as the administrative and social heart of Starfleet. It was the setting for Aaron's recovery arc, including his medical evaluations, counseling sessions with Suna, and his off-duty moments with Taron at Club 47. Missy Kinley Station. Location: Sol System, Earth Orbit. a specialized construction and repair facility. Unlike the social hub of ESD, MC Kinley is industrial and utilitarian. This is where the physical reconstruction of the Northstar took place. Aaron stood vigil over his ship here as it was disassembled and rebuilt. Deep Space Nine, DS9. Location: Beja Sector, Wormhole Terminus, a former Cardassian station. Now serving as a critical Federation outpost, it is the destination for the Northstar at the end of the story. Admiral Aaron has been summoned here for a classified alliance meeting regarding the Borg Cooperative, the Etherian sabotage, and the Thassin Fey threat. Drozana Station. Location: Donatu Sector. Status: Ferengi-operated trading hub, originally a 23rd century Federation deep space station. Drozana was abandoned and eventually repurposed as a neutral ground for trade. Despite its dilapidated interior and aging duotronic core, it remains one of the few places where Starfleet and KDF officers can meet without drawing phasers. Note: the station is infamous for structural instability and localized power failures. This lawless atmosphere has given rise to groups like Starfleet Dental, a guild of scammers who use the cover of mobile medical clinics to strip sub-processors from the pads of unsuspecting travelers. Appendix 3. Organizations and Groups. Starfleet Command. Affiliation: United Federation of Planets. Role: Operational and Administrative Authority. Starfleet Command serves as the primary governing force behind Admiral Aaron's career. They manage the high-level logistics of starship deployment, command assignments, and strategic oversight. Throughout the story, Command is represented through incident reviews, medical clearances, and the final orders that reassign the Northstar to the Batrika Nebula. The Cooperative. Affiliation: Independent Alliance Ally. Role: Liberated Borg Collective. The Cooperative is an independent body of former Borg drones pursuing autonomy and ethical recovery. They are distinct from the aggressive hive mind. They actively seek to protect liberated individuals and prevent re-assimilation. Currently, they are tracking the Thassin Fey threat alongside the Alliance. Borg Reclamation Project. Affiliation: Joint Initiative Federation Cooperative. Romulan Republic. Role: Rehabilitation and medical recovery. This specialized initiative provides the medical and psychological framework for de-assimilation. Led by Executive Director Hugh, the project focuses on recovering individuality and reintegrating survivors into galactic society. It represents the human side of post-Borg life. The Alliance. Affiliation: Multi-Power Coalition Federation. Klingon Empire. Romulan Republic. Role: Strategic Defense and Diplomacy, a multilateral coalition formed to coordinate responses to galaxy-ending threats. The Alliance oversees the classified task force Aaron joins at Deep Space Nine. They serve as the umbrella organization pooling resources to combat the Borg, the Etherians, and Thassin Fey. House Escarath. Affiliation: Klingon Empire. Role: Klingon House. House Escarath is a respected Klingon house that rose through deeds of valor rather than ancient lineage. While its warriors are known for ferocity, the house is equally notable for producing scientists and poets. They hold the belief that a deed not recorded is a deed not truly won. This philosophy expects members like Keithrak to contribute to the Empire through both action and intellectual understanding. Etherian Concordium. Affiliation: Multiversal, Independent. Role: Extra-dimensional collective. The Etherians are a technologically advanced, harmonious society originating from an alternate reality. Guided by leaders like Thassin Fey, they act as guardians against multiversal threats, specifically the Borg Kingdom. Their presence in the Prime Universe is defined by their willingness to share knowledge and resources with the Khitomer Alliance to preserve the stability of the multiverse. Iconians. Affiliation: Ancient Empire. Role: Known as Demons of Air and Darkness, the Iconians were a highly advanced civilization that dominated the quadrant over 200,000 years ago. They did not rely on warp drive. Instead, they used sophisticated gateways to travel instantly between worlds. Their empire was destroyed when a coalition of species, fearful of their power, bombarded their homeworld from orbit. Terran Empire. Affiliation: Mirror Universe. Role: Imperialist Conquerors. The Terran Empire is a dark reflection of the Federation, characterized by a survival of the fittest hierarchy and aggressive expansion. Under the absolute rule of Emperor Wesley Crusher, The Empire has transitioned from a standard military dictatorship into a psionically driven force of nature. They seek to dominate all realities, viewing the prime universe not as a peer, but as a resource to be harvested. Herc. Affiliation, ancient marauders. Role, a nomadic and ravaging force whose name literally translates to outsiders in Klingon. Over a millennium ago, they swarmed out of the Gamma Quadrant and descended upon Konos, plundering the Klingon homeworld of its most sacred treasures, including the Sword of Kalas. They are a swarm-minded species driven by a primal, unending hunger that makes them nearly impossible to reason with. While they were long considered a ghost story of the past, any modern encounter with the Herku is less of a battle and more of a desperate struggle against a living tide of destruction. The Borg Kingdom. The Borg Kingdom is the mirror universe counterpart to the Borg Collective. While they share a drive for perfection, the kingdom is defined by several key differences. Structure, it is led by a central Borg king rather than a decentralized hive mind. Aesthetic, the kingdom uses white armor for drones and red ship highlights, inverting the prime universe's black and green scheme. Combat, drones are capable of adapting to kinetic energy, including physical projectiles and melee weapons. Goal, the kingdom views assimilation as a way to bring order to chaos across the mirror universe. The Borg. Affiliation, the collective. Role, a relentless hive-mind civilization that views individual life as a flaw to be corrected. They don't negotiate or trade, they simply consume, forcibly assimilating the technology and biological distinctness of every culture they encounter. To the Borg, existence is a quest for a cold mechanical perfection. They are the ultimate predator of the galaxy, turning a species' own strengths against them until there is nothing left but another voice in the swarm. The Shadows, shadow beings, shadow species. Designation, classified. Species, extra-dimensional entities. Role, a mysterious and highly aggressive species originating from a dimension known as dark space. They are capable of infecting humanoid hosts, leading to a full-scale loss of physical and mental autonomy. Anatomically, they are described as perfect beings whose structural perfection is matched only by their hostility. While they primarily communicate through high-pitched screeches, the high-tier entity known as Umbra Prime is capable of sentient speech. Following a period of exploitation by the Iconians and the Mirror Universe, a formal truce was eventually brokered by Admiral Aaron to return the species to their own dimension. The Shadow Incident. Affiliation, Federation Classified, Section 31. Role, a catastrophic first contact failure and subsequent cover-up involving Aaron's previous ship. During an initial mission to the VL-245 system, a shadow being broke containment and infected the crew, leading to a rapid, uncontrollable outbreak. The mission commander, then Captain Aaron, was forced to order the ship self-destruct, resulting in the loss of 235 souls. Starfleet Command subsequently erased all official mentions of the event from public records, reclassifying it to hide the existence of the species and the vulnerability of the Federation. Appendix. Protocol VL-245 Decryption Key. The following documentation is classified Level 10 clearance only. Unauthorized access to the VL-245 shadow cipher is a court-martial offense. Cipher phrase tactical definition required command. Response. The primary command. Processor, main bridge. Initiate localized force field isolation. Ink in the primary optic. Foreign biological or digital corruption of the ship's main. Sensors. Switch to manual. Non-optical navigation. Eggs in the marrow. Parasitic infestation within. The internal structural. Supports. Prepare for emergency structural integrity field. ESIF. Overload. Shadows in the nursery. Intruders have breached the life support systems or crew quarters. Deploy internal security teams. Prepare for hard vacuum venting. Subtract the living from the dead. Triage calculation. Calculate the percentage of compromised crew versus viable survivors. Execute Protocol 0, total sector purge, if the ratio exceeds. 0.4. The hatchlings are listening. The infestation has reached a state of collective consciousness or acoustic. Sensitivity. Maintain strict radio silence. Engage stealth running. Protocols. Appendix 4. Key locations and references. RISA. Type. Class M Pleasure Planet. Role, backstory, and emotional anchor, a Federation world famous for its tropical climate and open culture. While Risa does not appear as an active setting, it serves as a critical reference point for Aaron and Terran's early relationship. It represents a time of innocence and choice before the Dominion War and subsequent traumas intervened. Kinger system. Type, star system. Role, inciting incident location, the site of the tactical engagement, against the Borg kingdom that resulted in the near destruction of the U.S.S. Northstar. This battle led to the death of First Officer Zhong Su-min and forced the start of Admiral Aaron's recovery arc. It is the definitive point of fracture in his command history. Casperia Prime. Type, Class M planet, Horvian cluster. Role, this inhabited prime world is easily recognized by its prominent planetary ring system. Long celebrated as a premier Federation resort destination, it hosted the Medical and Cybernetics Conference organized by Dr. Boreas Theopoulos. Aaron was invited here to provide a personal perspective on long-term assimilation recovery. The Nexus. Type, extra-dimensional temporal phenomenon. Deep space. Role, metaphysical anomaly. The Nexus is an energy ribbon that travels through the galaxy on a predictable cycle. It is a doorway to a realm where time and space have no meaning. Those pulled into it find themselves in a state of pure consciousness where their deepest desires and memories become reality. While the experience is one of absolute peace, it is ultimately a trap that prevents an individual from returning to the physical world. For Aaron, the Nexus represents the dangerous pull of the past and the lure of a life where the losses of the war never happened. Batrika Nebula. Type, interstellar gas cloud. Alpha Quadrant. Role, mission setting. An interstellar cloud known for dense formations and complex subspace disturbances. Its unstable gravimetric and chronoton activity makes it a hazard for standard vessels, requiring the high-level sensor suites of an Odyssey-class ship. The Northstar is assigned here in the Epilogue for a long-range survey, a mission that offers Aaron and his crew a safe harbor for quiet, deliberate work. Club 47. Type, civilian establishment. Location, Earth Space Dock, a popular social hub famous for its neon. Aesthetics, loud music, and total lack of Starfleet formality. It provided the neutral ground necessary for Aaron and Terran's reconnection. The club is a haunt for local personalities, ranging from high-ranking ambassadors to the desperate Trill. New Romulus, Mulrihan. Type, Class M planet. Location, Azure Sector. New Romulus serves as the capital for the Romulan Republic. Established in 2409, the world is a sanctuary for Romulans and Remans, seeking a future free from the Tal Shiar. New Harmony Colony. Location, Harmony, Vulcan Colony. Summary. Located 15.8 light-years from Earth, New Harmony is a historic 22nd-century colony and a vital agricultural and scientific center. Known for its pacifist roots and sustainable interspecies design, it serves as a key diplomatic retreat and transport hub featuring bioluminescent forests and the Groombridge Conservatory. Appendix 5. Context and Legacy. Star Trek Online. STO. Platform. Massively multiplayer online role-playing game. Setting, early 25th century. Post-Nemesis timeline. Star Trek Online. Allows players to inhabit the role of a captain within the Star Trek universe. The game emphasizes command-level decision-making and episodic storytelling. The story of Under the Uniform is written to be compatible with this timeline, tone, and narrative flexibility. Admiral Aaron and the U.S.S. Northstar are original creations that exist within the same space as major game events, such as the Iconian War and the Terran incursions, without contradicting established lore. This reflects the game's core strength, the ability for players to tell personal stories alongside official content. The Foundry. Status, Legacy System. Discontinued. Role, User-Generated Content Engine. The Foundry was a system that allowed players to design and publish custom story missions. It functioned as a creative space for original scripts, custom maps, and recurring casts of characters. Many authors treated their work as episodic series that functioned like independent shows. These stories prioritized character interiority and long arc consequences. Although the system is no longer active, its impact remains significant. For many, including the author of this work, the Foundry served as a training ground for long-form storytelling and emotional investment. The Admiral Aaron Foundry missions. Within the Foundry ecosystem, Admiral Aaron was the central figure in a linked series of missions exploring tactical challenges and personal stakes. These missions serve as the narrative predecessors to this book. These missions serve as Division, Part I, Invictus, Extinction, Adrift, Foundry Mission, Part IA. Affiliation, Adrift. Role, a high-stakes recovery operation in the VL-245 system. The mission follows a Starfleet investigator tasked with locating the missing U.S.S. Northstar and its commander, Admiral Aaron. Upon finding the ship adrift, boarding parties discover a shadow being infection that had previously caused the destruction of Aaron's ship years prior. The mission culminates in a confrontation with a perfect being born from an experiment involving assimilated human and shadow creeper DNA, setting the stage for a multiversal conspiracy. Variants. Foundry Mission, Part 2nd. Starfleet Command, Temporal Integrity Commission. Role, a temporal intervention mission focused on apprehending a power-crazed madman from the Mirror universe. The plot reveals that Mirror Admiral Aaron has been using 29th century technology to conduct genetic experiments with the shadow species from an extra-dimensional realm known as dark space. The journey involves a time paradox where the player travels back in time to encounter Aaron of Borg and prevent the Mirror Admiral from unleashing shadow beings upon the Borg Collective to seize control of the timeline. Redacted 13. Foundry Mission, Part 3rd. Affiliation, Section 31. Khitomer Alliance. Role, the conclusion of the Adrift and Variant series, centered on the fallout of the Shadow incident. The mission uncovers a massive infiltration plot where the rapacious Species 013 and the Solanae have been abducting and replacing key Starfleet personnel with clones. It reveals that the Admiral Aaron rescued in part was actually a clone implanted with the original's memories. The series ends with the liberation of the true Aaron of Borg, the destruction of the original Northstar, and a fragile peace treaty brokered with the shadow species. Invictus, Foundry Mission, Part I, Affiliation, Starfleet Command, Borg Cooperative. Role, a storytelling experience set in the Kiana system of the Delta Quadrant. Admiral Aaron, stationed at the cloaked starbase Invictus, reveals he has made contact with the Carina, a trans-dimensional race capable of telepathic communication and viewing multiple timelines. The mission centers on a prophecy involving a genetically engineered child, fathered by Admiral Aaron and carried by Borg Cooperative Ambassador Miley, intended to unite the descendants of Earth, humans and Voth. The plot culminates in a Voth invasion led by the Ministry of Elders, who seek to destroy the child to preserve their doctrine. Extinction, Foundry Mission, Part 2. Affiliation, Starfleet, Unsanctioned, Voth Evolutionary Forces. Role, the conclusion to the Invictus storyline, following a telepathic warning from the Carini. The player must choose whether to assist Admiral Aaron in a rogue rescue mission to Voth space to save his son, Naruto Aaron Exil. The mission explores two potential futures, one of total war where the Voth destroy Earth, and another where a peaceful revolution led by the Voth Evolutionary Forces leads to the species joining the Federation. The narrative concludes with Admiral Aaron, suffering from advanced Irumodic syndrome, being transported to the 28th century by the Carini to live in a restored state with his son. Starbase Invictus Social Zone, a spotlighted Foundry mission that functioned as an immersive social hub. It was celebrated for its world-building and community engagement, reinforcing the capacity for shared experiences beyond combat. Appendix, Special Foundry Missions, Firkin's Chair, Affiliation, Pockled. Role, an April Fool's standalone set in the Argala system. The mission follows the Pockled hunt for a chair because it makes us go. It was built as a comedic diversion, using quick, intense ground combat and sudden explosions to subvert expectations and defeat players. Instantly. Resistance. Affiliation. Starfleet. Mission. An April Fool's standalone released in April 2019. This was the final mission from STO Admiral Aaron before the Foundry sunset. It begins as a desperate Borg assault on Earth, but shifts into a celebratory tribute. It features a Borg party cube, cameos from the community, and ends with a solemn memorial honoring years of player-created stories. Credits and acknowledgments. This story is a work of fan fiction based on the Star Trek Online universe. I would like to thank Star Trek, Cryptic Studios, Paramount, and Star Trek Online for providing the sandbox that allowed these stories to begin. And 2026, CBS Studios, Inc. 2026, Paramount Pictures Corp. Star Trek and related marks and logos are trademarks of CBS Studios, Inc. All rights reserved. 2026 AOC Games, Inc. Game code 2026 Cryptic Studios, Inc. Cryptic is a trademark of Cryptic Studios, Inc. All rights reserved. Other trademarks are property of their respective owners. The Northstar voyage continues. The Northstar slips back into the silent cradle of the stars, carrying a commander who is finally whole. For Admiral Aaron, the void has stopped being a place of ghosts and static. It has become a canvas for a future he actually believes he deserves. With an anchor to hold him and a crew to carry him, the journey continues not just out of duty, but out of a quiet, newfound love for the horizon. He watched the stars stretch into the brilliant white lines of maximum warp, knowing that every light year toward Deep Space Nine is a testament to the strength found in others and the peace he has finally found within himself.